Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. It's great to be with you here today. I am here with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on RoxomTV. Right now, the price of Bitcoin just took a tragic dip right below $90,000. It looks like the end of the world is nigh. Bitcoin is dead. You've heard it all before. You're going to hear from somebody you've heard from before here on RoxomTV too, as well. I'm going to bring him up to the stage right now to kick us off for our first hour here of this 3-hour marathon broadcast. And that is Brandon Gentile. Good to have you back, man. I'm always trying to make sure I pronounce your name right. How you doing, brother?
You nailed it. You nailed it, Walker. You're a consummate professional. It's great to see you, brother. I appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So we've got an interesting day right now. I've been following things along the morning. A couple of big announcements here. I mean, just coming out of yesterday, the typical Monday fashion, we had Michael Saylor of Strategy finally breaking over the 700,000 Bitcoin mark. Truly just like an insane amount of Bitcoin here. He made another very large purchase. It was around 22,305 Bitcoin, approximately $2.1 billion. Average price of 95,300 per coin. So as usual, he bought the local top. I'm glad to see that. Anytime he buys it below the current price, I always get a little bit worried. But what's your take on this, man? I mean, do you think that is he on track? I saw some estimates saying he's on track to basically hit a million Bitcoin if he keeps buying at a steady pace for this year. I mean, do you think he ever plans on stopping buying, or is this just like a nothing stops this train kind of situation? Like if he can keep getting money, he's going to keep buying corn.
I mean, he is a man of his word, at least so far, right? He's been saying, I'll buy Bitcoin at any price, any USD price. So here we are. And he's not afraid to buy in those local tops, like you said. So yeah, I think that as long as people are going to throw him cash and, whether it's debt or equity or whatever it is, he's going to keep buying Bitcoin until further notice. And, I think, again, there's all the conspiracy theories and there's all the different things. The one thing you can say for sure, obviously, is that he's been a net positive, at least in my opinion, to Bitcoin. Obviously, I don't think we'd have as much, just, I don't know, call it notoriety or just, Wall Street taking notice or whatever it is. And again, you and I are cut from the same cloth in the sense that, we want anything but a larger state, right? So it's like, it's a permissionless money though. So like, whether you like it or not, anyone can buy Bitcoin, right? Your enemies can buy Bitcoin, corporations, states, whatever it is. So that's the contrast that Bitcoiners have to live with. This, two things can be true world. And that's the thing I think that people are really going to start learning, especially in the geopolitical stuff, like all the things we're seeing here. So anyway, before we go too far down these tangents, I think Saylor's going to keep buying. He's going to keep crushing. If people are going to throw him cash and this fake currencies and they're going to let him do, debt or whatever it is, he's going to keep buying.
Well, and I think what you've just identified there is really the key point. This is something I try to stress a lot, which is that, Bitcoin is money for enemies, right? That's the whole point of it. It doesn't really matter if you do or do not like the fact that Michael Saylor is gobbling up Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if you like the fact that nation states are buying Bitcoin, are accumulating confiscated Bitcoin as well, of course. We got some news on that I think we can cover here in a little bit as well. But it doesn't matter because that's the whole point of Bitcoin, is that anyone, anywhere in the world who wants to opt into this network can. That is its power. Now, you don't have to like it, but you have to understand this is an inevitability. What I've said time and time again is this is what it looks like when Bitcoin is winning. If Bitcoin wasn't winning, you wouldn't see this adoption. But Bitcoin is winning, so you do see it. And to me, it's just as simple as that. And I mean, I think as far as Saylor goes, I would agree with the analysis that he has been overwhelmingly a net positive. People give him a lot of grief. He gets a lot of flack, but man, I don't think anybody's logged more Bitcoin podcast hours than that guy. Not just Bitcoin podcast, but everything else. I mean, everything. I've got to give him credit too, because there are a lot of people who may be vocal Bitcoiners, but I've seen them get on larger, non-Bitcoin podcasts, and they kind of like hide the Bitcoin thing a little bit. Like, don't want to talk too much about Bitcoin. Saylor's like, I refuse to talk about anything but Bitcoin. Don't even ask me a dumb question about it. So you've got to give him some credit for that. Like the guy stays on message, stays on brand, and he talks about Bitcoin. And he does it in a way that I think has convinced a ton of people who would not otherwise have touched it to get on board. And so ultimately, I think that's like getting people to take that orange pill. That's a huge net positive, aside from all of the MicroStrategy stuff. Like you can take that aside, just in isolation. I think it's still a positive. So yeah, he's I think he's been a huge net positive. But ultimately, it's like with these treasury companies, I just don't see anybody coming close to catching him. I don't think it's possible at this point. I mean, are you in the same boat there?
I mean, honestly, Walker, the only way the only way is if like the retail and like the rest of the world doesn't jump on, and we keep just like meandering, we're channeling, going sideways, the crab market, all this stuff. I guess that's the only perceivable way that someone somehow figures out a way to kind of catch up to them somehow. But, I think you and I and a lot of us thought that, hey, we'd be well into the six figures at this point or something to that effect, where it's going to continually get harder and harder. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to, because as we know, they're going to keep printing USD and all fiat government currencies. So the USD and the fiat price of Bitcoin will continue going up ad infinitum, forever. So that will keep happening. We have these pullbacks, these channeling where, hey, people could be stacking like crazy right now. People could be doing this playbook. He's put, like you said, he's put it all out there. He's logged more podcast hours and more stage appearances than anyone, going all the way back to, doing Breedlove's, the Saylor series, right? I mean, and there's so many people that I know we've both talked to over the years who were very orange pilled from that series alone, probably the most out of anything, unless it's like a Trudeau, right? Like a Trudeau event. I always joke that Justin Trudeau is the greatest orange pillar on earth, because you have these dumb things happen, these black swan events, freezing people's accounts, all these different things, and then you're gonna have the bad black swan events happen. Saylor's like a good, like a white swan or event, where the Trudeaus are the black swan event. So we're gonna have these, but again, to answer the question, unless we keep doing this, which again, I don't think it's going to last much longer, where people can get these subdued prices, Saylor is going to keep doing what he's doing, and it's going to be very hard. You wait another year or two to jump on this trade. It's going to be very hard, if not impossible, like you said, to catch Saylor.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And, if you look at it from just the Bitcoin production standpoint, we're producing about 450 BTC per day, right? 3,100 per week. So this latest buy that he had just in the space of a day, it cuts out more than 7 weeks of global Bitcoin mining supply. It's absorbing it in one move. And I think the way I look at this, Brandon, is it's like that old, kind of the old paradox, right? What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Well, the unstoppable force is literally infinite fiat money that will be created, infinite demand on the fiat side. That the demand will only increase if you're denominating it in fiat, right? Fiat currencies, the genie doesn't go back in the bottle. They go one way, and that is increasing the supply, debasing the currency. On the other hand, you have the immovable object, which is Bitcoin's 21 million finite, absolutely finite supply. That's not moving. So what happens? Well, I mean, it goes up and to the right and violently. And I think we've been lulled into a little bit of this false sense of security or insecurity. I'm not sure which way, depending on how you're looking at it, over the past little over a year now, where Bitcoin has, as you said, crabbed along, chop solidated, however you'd like to say it. And people are kind of almost getting bored with it. I mean, if you look at this, people have been much more, there's been more, people getting amped up about silver, right? Silver just basically has been on a tear. It's fresh all-time highs, $95 per ounce. It's extending a pretty powerful rally. It's moved over 30% year to date. And investors have just been piling into precious metals, gold as well, right? But silver's caught a bit more of an impressive or aggressive bid, I should say. And to me, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, everybody is kind of, like looking at silver, looking at gold, maybe looking even at copper, looking at kind of these metals, which ultimately have, industrial metals, right? That's what they are ultimately. Silver and gold, and to a much lesser extent copper, have been used as money because we didn't have Bitcoin, right? So they're an inferior alternative, but they're ultimately industrial metals. Very, very useful. They have a lot of utility as industrial metals. Doesn't make them great money. Gold's done a pretty good job. But I look at this now, Brandon, and I have to think people start piling into silver. People start piling into gold, kind of now that things are feeling maybe a little toppy in those. Peter Schiff's taking victory laps. And to me, I'm just thinking, boy, if I was in precious metals, I would be seriously considering a rotation to digital gold, out of physical Bitcoin and into digital gold. You know what I mean? But I mean, where are you at with this? Do you think these precious metals rallies continue because this is just the debasement trade and Bitcoin's just taking a while to catch up? Or do you think we start to see a larger shift where there's more of an acknowledgement that, look, yeah, silver and gold, these are maybe trades, right? Gold's done a pretty good job, but Bitcoin is this long-term store of value that also happens to function as an amazing medium of exchange. Where are you at with this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was gold and silver guy 15 years ago and real estate guy. And after I left playing, retired from hockey. And so I'm empathetic to that world, and, facts change at the end of the day, and gold and silver, like you said, for 1,000 years was the best thing we did have. And if no one's read the article that Gigi did, was it 5 years ago now or something like that, of, Bitcoin is time. It's so, like, a gold and silver person needs to read it. All Bitcoiners need to read. I mean, everyone needs to read it. But he talks about it's a longer article. It's an unbelievable article, but one of the big things is that there's two types of money. There's the ledger, and then there's the physical tokens. And for thousands of years, we had physical tokens, obviously. I mean, you had ledgers, but there was no way globally to have this ledger on a global scale and to trust what was actually happening. Obviously, we didn't have the tech and to be able to do it. But then over the last 100 years or half century, whatever it is, we've had the ability through computers and things like that to do this. We've just never had the ability to have a ledger that could span globally, have instant settlement, and then trust that someone wasn't screwing with the ledger. And so that was what Bitcoin solved for at the end of the day. That's one of the huge discoveries of Satoshi, is discovering a way for all these things happen because of the very beauty of the physical metals. That also is its downfall. Hence why we've had paper currencies for so long, because we were trying to figure out a way to solve this problem, this ledger problem, going from physical tokens. And so in saying all this, this is the auditing Bitcoin, that, the trade is the auditing. It is the final settlement itself. And that's, again, the killer app of Bitcoin. So how do we, and then the proof of work, we go into, why that is. And, but people have to go read that, because, like, for instance, people think about like the paper, we have paper in gold and silver, we have paper in Bitcoin as well. The difference to me, and I would love your thoughts on this too, but the difference to me with Bitcoin is that because it's auditing itself every 10 minutes, and you can't actually audit gold and silver, there is zero way to actually audit gold and silver globally, that eventually people blow themselves up in Bitcoin, because you can't outrun the speeding train. You can't outrun the every 10 minutes, the blocks coming in, because eventually your bluff gets called, and you can't outrun that. You couldn't outrun it for a day or a week or a year or whatever it is, maybe a number of years, but eventually you blow yourself up, a la FTX, Terra Luna, all these different, schemes that go on. And then eventually, as Max Kaiser thousands of years. And it is this massive sea change going forward that is very hard. Again, being empathetic, just human nature, facts change, things change. I had to change, you had to change. We go through this gauntlet as Bitcoiners, and it's not just we wake up one day and, I granted myself a wish because I found a magic lamp, or like I've got a bunch of Bitcoin. Like, all Bitcoiners had to go through this journey, this gauntlet, and to go through the education or go through the pain of getting screwed somewhere else, and then you come to Bitcoin eventually. So it's not, I know, like, our memes and things like that, they kind of rub people the wrong way, but it's to shake the context of the average person and to wake them up from the stupor. So again, gold and silver are going to be here for a little bit, kind of landing this plane and bringing it all the way back around, because it's the legacy trade, it's the debasement trade. Central banks all over the world have it. The older generation, which has majority of the wealth, also has a lot of gold and silver. So again, it's this 10 or 20 year demographic shift that's going to play out over time. They're going to have these black swan and white swan events, though, I think, that are going to really exponentially grow Bitcoin. But in the meantime, you plan for, like, hey, it's going to take a tiny bit, wait for the winds to change and people to realize what's actually happening. But this is a truly once in a lifetime, once in humanity change, and it's not going to come tomorrow like we all thought. Once we get into Bitcoin, hey, it's going to change. No, it's going to take a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking in terms of the demographic shift. It's like gold is basically Bitcoin for boomers, right? And if you look at the younger generations, if you look at millennials, like myself, if you look at Gen Z, the Zoomers, they're not as enamored. They don't have the historical bias. They weren't around. They weren't around in 1971 when all these boomers bought their houses for 2 raspberries and a bushel of blueberries. Like, we weren't around for that. We've only lived in this kind of post hard money, this fiat world. And so for us, when we don't have this attachment, this psychological attachment to gold, to precious metals in the same way, it's easier for us to break out of that existing paradigm because we weren't immersed in it quite as much. For the boomers, I understand it. And I know there's a lot, as you know, a lot of great boomers in Bitcoin too. A lot of boomers that hold Bitcoin, a lot of super based boomers that really get it. But I think as we start to see, it's like that, progress advances one funeral at a time. I don't wish funerals on any boomer, but the reaper comes for us all eventually, no matter what generation you're from. Point being, as we go forward, there's a natural demographic shift. where you start to people that are internet native, Zoomers that are internet native, they don't even remember a pre-Wi-Fi world, right? We at least remember
Yes.
pre-Wi-Fi. Like we remember, dial-up, we remember DSL, all these things. We remember before there was Wi-Fi. They don't even remember that. They are fully digitally native. So for them, a digitally native internet money, i.e. Bitcoin, that makes a lot of sense. Now, they don't have a lot of purchasing power right now. That's one of the problems. But as you start stacking Bitcoin, that's a problem that starts solving itself. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is that in my mind, Bitcoin is this great wealth transfer. It is this re-monetization. It's this reprioritization of everything we see here that's been so warped in the fiat world. You look at this, Brandon, and kids coming out of college today with $100,000+ in student debt, a job that's not going to pay them nearly enough to be able to save for a home and start a family. You understand a bit of the nihilism that creeps in. You understand a bit of that despondency. And I think that Bitcoin offers this credible exit. It offers this way for younger folks, especially who don't have the capital yet, to opt out and begin accumulating that capital in a meaningful way that's actually going to work for them. And to me, that's one of the really heartening things I see. It's giving younger generations, especially, open any generation, doesn't matter, but younger generations especially, who need that advantage. They don't have the advantage of having 50 years of saving and investing in the stock market that only goes up, and having a house that they bought for a bushel of raspberries that's now worth $5 million. They don't have any of that. So they need something else. And in my mind, that's not going to be gold. That's not going to be silver. That's going to be Bitcoin, right? They'll probably get trapped by crypto for a little while, but then hopefully come back around to Bitcoin before it's too late. And kind of speaking of crypto a little bit, one of the things that I wanted to touch on here was just the Trump family's wealth being sort of increasingly tied to Bitcoin and crypto. And maybe I'll just kind of go through some of the key points here. So the Trump family's estimated kind of share of their net worth that is linked to crypto-related ventures is now $6.8 billion, a massive, massive amount. And this is a bit of a shift from real estate, right? Not that they're still not heavily invested in that, but this is still a massive shift. So, this has been a real estate heavy empire. It's defined their wealth for decades, right? That's what the Trumps are known for. That's why the Trump name is on so many hotels and buildings, whether or not he owns the building or not, or is just leasing his name out. But according to a new Bloomberg feature, these, all these digital assets, yes, some Bitcoin related stuff, but a lot of crypto related stuff, have really moved from the margins into the center. And so they've had multiple token projects. Obviously, we had the Trump coin, the Melania coin. You've got Trump was launching NFTs actually before, long before, or in the midst of, in between his times in office. But this is just kind of, it's kind of interesting. They also had the World Liberty Financial. And this one is a very strange one to me. There's a lot of kind of weird stuff happening behind the scenes there, but it's generated a lot of money for them. So did the NFT. The NFT sales alone were tens of millions of dollars. Now, this is sort of an interesting time that we live in. I know as Bitcoiners, you and I were looking at the Trump and Melania coin launches and thinking, what the hell is going on right now? Kind of par for the course. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Brandon, does this like heavy involvement of the Trump family in the Bitcoin and crypto industry, now again, can't stop this. Anyone can do whatever they want, right? But does this risk further sort of politicizing? I don't really care about the crypto side, but on the Bitcoin side, do you think this just further turns off a lot of people on the left who would benefit from Bitcoin, undeniably, but they're just going to get sucked deeper into that hole of anything Trump does must be bad, so I'm going to go in the opposite direction? Do you think the polarization increases around Bitcoin, or do you think maybe cooler heads prevail?
I think in the short term, for sure, I agree with you in that sense. Like it's definitely a short term headwind, and I think that's part of what we've seen the last year. And you have what I don't know what it was, 70, 80 million people that voted for Trump. And I think the fascinating part, honestly, Walker, is that you had all these diehard MAGA people, and perceivably, a lot of them didn't do anything with Bitcoin. I mean, and Trump made it a fairly big part of his platform. I mean, you can't say that he didn't. And so he's at the convention, he's doing, so it was obviously a big thing. Like the average person definitely saw it. And you would think at that point that people, I don't know, call it 1%, 2%, 5%, 10% of the MAGA would have been like all over Bitcoin. And you would have this swoon, these people like, you go search it, everything would have gone up like, well, what is this Bitcoin? Like, I do need to get it. Trump said it. And you didn't even have that. So I don't know if that speaks more to like, even MAGA wasn't even following what Trump was doing so much, or in the sense that people are just so scared of Bitcoin. I have no idea. Maybe the crypto stuff distracted from it. I don't know. But I think it's a really fascinating thing that a very few people have talked about, because it's almost had the complete opposite effect with Bitcoin, hence this channeling and even going down over the last year where like no one thought it was cool that he was doing that. And so that to me is a really, really fascinating thing. So I think in the short term, it's a definite headwind. In the long term, again, I think you just kind of mentioned it, like nothing stops this train. Like Bitcoin's gonna Bitcoin. There's, no one can stop it, obviously. So it's gonna keep doing its thing. I mean, look, he's doing more for Bitcoin. He's flapping his gums about it. But then look, I want $1 trillion military budget. Now I want 1.5 trillion. So like this is going to, like inevitably he is pumping everyone's bags that are in Bitcoin. And they're going to keep doing this. They have to. It's a debt-based system backed by nothing. So they have to keep printing the dollar into oblivion, like we talked about earlier. So there's no top to Bitcoin in USD terms because this has to keep going. The Ponzi has to keep speeding up. So I think that, again, it's a short-term thing, all the NFTs. And again, like you said, Bitcoin is digital real estate. So part of it, I mean, with the Trump boys doing the American Bitcoin, with Matt Prusek and what they're doing, again, like that makes sense to them, right? Like it's real estate. You're putting, poles in the ground, you're putting concrete down, you're doing stuff. So like that makes a ton of sense to them, actually. And I think they're seeing it now. I actually just asked Matt recently if the guys get it, because he even kind of alluded to like, yeah, they had their crypto projects and stuff like that. And I just said like, hey, did they get it? Like, did they kind of see what the difference with Bitcoin is now? And he's like, yeah, they do. They get it now. But again, to that game, like I think it was 5, 6, 7 years ago, I remember seeing in the Forbes, 400 or whatever it was, that they had like 2 or 3 billion in net worth, like Trump did total. And now, like you said, just the crypto stuff alone is 6 billion, 7. So again, that goes to things that we've all talked about forever of like, it's a scam system and you got to scam back. Like you got to fight back somehow. Whether that means just buying Bitcoin and self-custodying it, running a node and just be, okay, this is my vote against the system. Or, hey, some guys are going to, everyone's morals are different. What I do is not exactly what the Trump family is going to do or what you're going to do or whatever, but they're going to go do their thing. They're going to get theirs. And I think that that's part of it. If there's one thing that Trump has done though, too, like Trump, for the most part, he'll bluster a lot, and I think this confuses the living hell out of so many people. Like he'll say all these random things, but he will telegraph like everything they've done for years. Like they telegraph what they're doing and what is going to happen. Like he talked about Greenland a year ago. Here we are with Greenland. All these things he has said, and the mainstream news, the legacy media, and then people on the right and the left get so like caught up in all these shenanigans, and it's like he's telling you what he's going to do. I mean, getting on the debasement trade, all these things, saying I want the rates down. I mean, go through all the things he says and really hits on for years. I mean, the China stuff he's hit on for decades. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to like, this is the thing that I just feel like it's like right there for everyone to see, and everyone like confuses like what all the little things he does to like knock people off their rocker and like shift the context and over to a window. And those are all little daily things he talks about. But I think that's the thing that is just kind of sitting there that people, don't see at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point too about the American Bitcoin mining company, just because that is sort of the project there that is a departure from the other crypto related projects, right? They're mining Bitcoin. That's I mean, it's not necessarily an easy business, right? It's a very, very competitive business, but it is ultimately something where they have departed from the straight up shitcoinery. And maybe it's like Brandon, many of us, many Bitcoiners who went through a shitcoiner phase. We initially got in, we were, attracted to whatever the shiny object was. I mean, I didn't know you could buy fractions of a Bitcoin back in 2017. So I bought a couple of Litecoin because I was like, I don't have enough money to buy a whole Bitcoin. So like we all start from a place of zero knowledge about Bitcoin. Many people go through a crypto shitcoiny phase. Some of them just happen to be presidents of the United States, and them and the first lady issue shitcoins right ahead of getting into office, but hey, like that was, I think, a shame to see that but it's like, at least I think it made a lot of people, hopefully, if they do ever get into Bitcoin and crypto, they just skip the crypto part because they're like, wow, that whatever Trump did there was such an obvious money grab scam that I'm just going to reject that. And maybe it leads them more to Bitcoin. I don't know. Or maybe it just makes them reject everything because crypto is Bitcoin is crypto and they're just still confused by it. I'm not sure, but it's going to be interesting to see.
I don't want to interrupt you. I want to add context. I want to add context to this because that's how I got into. I mean, the same time you did as an investor. I retired from hockey in 2012, and I got immediately. Ironically, I picked up some books in 09, 10, 11 when I was playing hockey, and you have a lot of time on your hands as an athlete and whatever in that world. Like you go to the rink, you go to the facilities for a couple hours, and the rest of the day is yours. So I was very political at the time in the 2000s. But then once the financial crash happened, as I graduated Michigan State University, I was like, what am I going to learn about money? And it was like, oh, this is on me. Like I got to figure out what I'm actually doing now that I've graduated college. Ironically, so got into Creature from Jekyll Island and got these books. But it was because of Robert Kiyosaki and Donald Trump books. They wrote 2 books in the 2000s, Why We Want You to Be Rich and then The Midas Touch. Those books I picked up at a grocery store, like the bargain bin. And I was a reader. So like, okay, it makes sense. I'm in the, it was weird that I'm in a grocery store bargain bin, like book section, but it was like, I picked them up and it blew my mind, like changed my life. And it led me down the path of, okay, I'm reading The Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver with Mike Maloney, Creature from Jekyll Island. It led me to all these other books of realizing, oh my gosh, this entire system's a scam. Like all the politics, all the stuff, as you say all the time, right? This isn't red versus blue, it's a state versus you. And it's collectivism versus individualism. This is the fight that we are in, and it's run by the money printers. And so that led me down this whole path. And so being an investor then I started doing real estate for really 10 years, from really all the 2010s, basically, investing in gold and silver. And then facts started changing. Once I saw Bitcoin in 2015, 16, I probably heard about it for the first time, somewhere in there, 2013 to 2015. Didn't look into it much until probably 2016. But what I did though, initially, to your point, is I started getting a lot of other position sizing and a lot of whatever the Coinbase had available at the time, the Litecoin, the 5 other coins, 10 other coins. I took position sizes as an investor, just like the Trumps, so that's why I wanted to add context. Like it makes sense. And this is where I talked about the gauntlet earlier. Like people go through the gauntlet of pain through education. No one knows. They come in with this old mindset and they bring it into this world, probably what the Trumps are doing. And they're like, hey, I'm going to put a bunch of these different things. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm going to create these different NFTs. Like this is what everyone's doing. And then you get into some of these things. Maybe they knew what they're doing. Maybe they didn't, some of them. But I think the story goes to Trump all the way on down to the average person. I know as Bitcoiners, we get a little toxic at times, but having that empathy of saying, hey, we all started in this place of learning and understanding. And then over that next year or two, I really started understanding and started converting all these other, unfortunately I had more Bitcoin than I had the other coins. I knew that as much. I knew it was the first one. So I got more of that one, but then I started converting them all and into Bitcoin at the end of the day. So again, like you said, hopefully the Trumps kind of go through that. The American Bitcoin thing maybe is that first step into like, there is something here. And again, I mean, we've seen him talk. We're at the conventions. We've seen him talk on YouTube. Eric Trump talks the talk. I mean, like I haven't really seen him, like as a Bitcoiner, like someone who's sitting here listening to us, like you can tell Peter Schiff, or I could tell like a Robert Kiyosaki, one of my biggest mentors. He's learned a lot over the years. And it's weird to be in front of your mentor at times, right? They can mentor you in many areas, but when you're in front of them on something and you can tell they don't know everything they need to know. And like a Peter Schiff, he still conflates crypto and Bitcoin. Like he doesn't totally get it. I get that he's done some homework, but he doesn't get all of it. And as a Bitcoiner, you can snuff that out very easily. It's like anything. It's like the Gell-Mann amnesia, right? Like if you're an expert in some area, I'm going to know what I'm talking about. When I go over here, I just automatically start believing whatever that person says because I'm not an expert and I just believe that they are. And that's Gell-Mann amnesia. So then, now Nolan Barley talks about this all the time for years, right? So anyway, I wanted to add more context to what you're saying because this is like this weird world, this bridge I think we're in, going back to your point of the demographics. Look at our kids. I mean, your and my kids, they're all very young. They're going to know nothing else other than Bitcoin to this whole point. So do you think 20 years from now, they're going to be using gold and silver? Like, heck no. I mean, they don't know nothing else and they know the differences between them. So anyway, I wanted to add some context there, but I think it is important that we all start from that place.
No, I think the context is really helpful. And it's very easy once you're deep down the rabbit hole to forget where you started from and forget how long that journey took. And, yes, did some people grok it like right away and get the importance of it and like galaxy brained it in a moment? Yes. But that's the exception, not the rule, right? So it is, I think it's a good thing. And that's why I always lead with empathy when people don't understand, like, hey, you can buy a fraction of Bitcoin. It's like, I'm not going to call them stupid because I'd just be calling myself stupid because I didn't know that. I mean, I was stupid at that time for not knowing it. And naive. They are a little bit stupid, but it's okay. You're naive, right? But my point is like, lead with some empathy and think, hey, look, I was where you are once. Let's help you get to where I am now, right? But that takes a lot of journeys down the rabbit hole and tributaries to the side, and that's the beautiful thing, right? But we're going to go to a quick commercial break, but then when we come back, I do want to talk about some of these recent announcements out of the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, because I think there's some interesting stuff there. We're going to pick at that a little bit, a couple other stories, but we will be right back after a quick commercial break here on RoxomTV. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you, don't go!
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I am here with Brendan Gentile. We are right now, if I look at the price of Bitcoin, still hovering under 90,000 infinitely printable US dollars per Bitcoin at 89,647 petrodollars. You know, Brendan, again, as I kind of look back at this past year and even a little longer than this past year, if we kind of take from when Trump was won the election, right? Because I think that's when we started really seeing price start to make some moves, right? We were about the same as we are now, maybe a little bit lower. And it started really just, rocketing. We went up to the all-time highs. 2026, I think a lot of people were disappointed. Me, I was actually quite thrilled because I didn't think I'd be able to stack Bitcoin under 100K as much as I was able to. But as we now kind of look forward to 2026, we recently just had, I think it was just today, we had major Bitcoin bull and CEO of multiple companies, Jack Mallers. He has really kind of shifted the narrative a little bit for what 2026 is going to look like, as a lot of people I think have been a bit bearish coming out of the end of this year, again just kind of being lulled into that false sense of security with the chop solidation. We now see Jack Mallers coming out, and he's the CEO of Strike in 21. For anyone who doesn't know him, he's saying Bitcoin could reach 150 to 200K in 2026. Now, I think that's a little lowballing it a little bit, Brendan. I'm much more bullish than that, but I appreciate that he's being conservative. He's the CEO of a publicly traded company now. Probably got to be a little bit more careful with what he says. I'm not sure, but he's essentially argued in a recent video that interest rates are likely to move lower. I think that that's very much clear, especially with the Trump administration's pressure on the Federal Reserve. And governments are really going to lean back into money printing. On top of that, political pressure around the U.S. midterm elections will favor looser financial conditions more broadly. We know this is very much the case. Whenever an incumbent candidate performs poorly in their party performs poorly in midterms, it's usually because the economic conditions were perceived as not very good. So nobody wants that going in, right? It's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for a blue wave coming in on the midterms there. And he did also caution that Bitcoin could see a short-term dip before resuming its climb higher. Maybe this is that dip we're seeing now. But Mallers is squarely in the bullish camp. And what I like about Mallers is that he he's been consistently on message, much like Michael Saylor. He takes every opportunity he gets to talk about Bitcoin, but not just about number go up. That's one of the things I like about Mallers. He talks about it from also the perspective of, making people like Jeffrey Epstein's banker irrelevant, right? I think he was the one who coined that term, Jeffrey Epstein's banker.
Yeah.
I won't say who it's referencing specifically. I think you can guess. Of course, this is just alleged, even though they did pay JP Morgan Chase did pay a large fine to settle on behalf after some of those allegations came to light. But that's beside the point. I'd love to see the Epstein files opened up. I'll just leave it with that. But, we did Roxom did a recent analysis by our host, Susie Violet Ward, of 2026 Bitcoin price forecasts. And basically this showed that most of these mainstream analysts, their predictions are clustering between 120,000, 170,000, driven by, the usual suspects, ETF inflows, institutional adoption, Bitcoin's post-halving supply dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. But, we've had a lot of major financial institutions land pretty close to Maller's base case assumption, whether it's Standard Chartered or Bernstein. They're both expecting Bitcoin to trade around 150K in 2026. Again, saying this increased demand from asset managers, long-term allocators. And JP Morgan did a gold comparison model that implied Bitcoin could approach $170,000 this year. Again, that's JP Morgan Chase, right? They've their CEO hasn't always been the biggest fan of Bitcoin, but it seems that a lot of people within there are. We've got more aggressive price predictions. FundStrat's Tom Lee says 200 to 250, saying it's structurally underallocated. Perhaps some of that underallocation comes from him launching various Ethereum products, but we'll leave that there. But the point here, Brandon, is that, in my mind, this is just an incredibly bullish setup. I don't like to think too short term as it comes to Bitcoin because, we're both, again, you mentioned this earlier, we both have young kids. I'm looking at this now for a generational context. What's the price of Bitcoin going to be when my son is 20 years old, right? That's the kind of timescales I'm thinking out. What's it going to be in 40 years? And if I'm still around, what's going to be in 60 years, right? That's the kind of scales I'm thinking at. But short-term price movement does matter, and I think primarily it matters for awareness and adoption. NGU, in my mind, is still the best marketing that Bitcoin has because, like it or not, it's when people pay attention. So what I'd love to know from you is, what's your vibe going into this year? Are you with Mallers? We're going to be somewhere 150 to 200. I won't hold you to an exact one, but just more broadly, I mean, to me, this seems like a heck of a setup for a year because everyone is focusing on the other shiny objects. They're focusing on AI or quantum stocks or the actual shiny objects, silver and gold, the literal shiny objects. Where are you at with this? Do you think that the market is right now kind of mispricing Bitcoin or under allocated to Bitcoin?
Absolutely. I think it's a mindset shift, and I've been stuck on this really for the last year or two probably. And it's a 1 second decision to choose to use a money that does not steal from you, and it'll never. And again, we've talked about this earlier in the show. It is tough. You have to have empathy for people, and Bitcoin. It seems crazy when you don't understand, and it seems obvious once you do, and that's what's so hard. And I feel like there's a lot of almost people feel like they don't deserve to have wealth. And I don't mean wealth in the sense of number go up. It's wealth and time freedom. It's getting me off the hamster wheel. It's not having to be frozen because I didn't inject something into my body that the state or my employer said I needed to do because they're in bed together now. All the different things. That's your wealth. That's freedom. And we kind of lose that at times. And it's different, from the USD price going up. The NGU part is an unbelievable marketing tool of Bitcoin, and probably is the best. I mean, the second best is probably the Trudeau events. It's probably the Black Swan events. And I say it's second only because you hope that those don't have to happen. You hope the bad things don't have to happen. Everyone can just come in over time, and number goes up over time, and people just come and get educated. They come listen to Walker, they come listen to Roxom, they come listen to our podcast or whatever it is, and people just kind of learn over time, and that's great. But we know that that's not life, and so these moments where, and again, I think the other thing too is prices at the margin, right? So when the Bitcoin's coming off exchanges and going into cold storage, we know that that's 1 or 2 extra steps. That's some extra time that people have to take to think about it, to go do it. And I'm not going to do it, so I'm not going to go sell it. So that's why putting it in self-custody is so important, because that means the price is absolutely going to continue going up. It's going to be much harder for stats to be sold. And so not only from the freedom perspective, but that perspective as well. So I think that's why this is so important. But the price being made at the margin, we can't account for that. And that's why I think like the Plan B model from years ago, or the stock to flow, or the power law, all these different things I think are very good for like the human mind to conceptualize what's going on, just because a lot of us are visual by nature. But again, truly, Bitcoin breaks all the models. And eventually, because like you mentioned early on in the show today, that Bitcoin is truly finite, truly scarce. We've never seen that as human beings. We can't account for that. Like, we don't know how to account for that. So when it breaks, it breaks. And so overall, yes, like when you're looking, like you said, 20 years down the line, 100 years down the line, it's so criminally underpriced right now. And that's what the Bitcoin price is. It's kind of like the status, the gauge of where's the human educational level of Bitcoin and understanding that. It goes back to Gladstein's book of Check Your Financial Privilege. There's so many people in the West where a lot of the wealth is accumulated at that don't need Bitcoin right now. Like, let's call it what it is. Like, my bank account works right now, and it might work tomorrow, and it probably will work next week. Well, eventually that won't be the case. You know, you talk to Tony Yaz back in Lebanon, or you go to someone and talk to him in Zimbabwe, or, you know, you go through these examples. The EU has been talking everything they've been doing over the last year has been talking about CBDCs, freezing your bank accounts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen it in Cyprus before. We've seen it in South America numerous times. I mean, Argentina's had 6 currencies, I think, in the last 30 years or something like that. So these things happen, and they're going to continue happening. Now, does it take another 10 years or 20 years? Maybe, sure. And so that's where people get caught in this world of, hey, I don't want to win the lottery slowly over time and have true wealth and freedom and using my time and energy, my money when I want. I'd rather play funny games, try to hit the lottery, the actual lottery, or play in stocks and NVIDIA and do all these fun and games, and then potentially get frozen out of all this, instead of just, hey, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to have low time preference, and I'm just going to work, provide value, and win the lottery slowly over time. We know it is guaranteed to go up over time because we know that governments have to print over time. So it is inevitable. If it stays decentralized and secure, obviously we continue making sure that we're doing that, running nodes and et cetera. Those things are inevitable. And I think that that's, you know, going back to your initial question, as I'm roundabouting all this, you know, I love Jack, you know, like he was 200 to 700 last year or whatever it is. So I like that he's come down the price a little bit. So I appreciate that, or respect. And again, I think that's very, I'd be shocked if that to me is the low end. I'd be shocked if it wasn't, because of the things you mentioned as well, the rates, the amount of currency they need to flood into the system. Now, in saying that, we can get conspiratorial and say, hey, you know, they're all in it together. They're trying to do such and such, and they're not gonna actually do much, because we thought this was gonna happen last year too. We thought things were gonna run up, and maybe it's not gonna happen. Maybe they're gonna fight Trump in other ways, or whatever. So could it go sideways again and try to shake a lot of people out? And maybe it will, but I do think that that's the low end. I'd be shocked if it wasn't in the, you know, low to mid 6 figures, you know, something like that, you know, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 by the end of the year. That would be shocking to me. But again, this accounts for, like, I know Samson gets a lot of crap for the Omega candle and going to 1 million and stuff like that, but that's where I was saying earlier, I was trying to kind of lay the context for that we don't know. All these laws and all these models are awesome until, you know, we're dealing with this exponential thing that it's hard to kind of fathom, because again, you can have white swan, you have black swan events happening with a scarce asset, which we have never seen before. So how can you account for something like that? And then you have a situation where if there are funny games being played, and there's paper, you know, whatever it is, those things are getting blown up. So now you have this weird world where all these things are happening, and we just haven't seen anything like this before. So to me, that's the low side. I appreciate Jack saying that, but that'd be my base case, or my low case, I should say.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that you said there, which I think is really, really important, and maybe doesn't get talked about enough, or maybe it does, maybe it gets talked about too much, I don't know, but I think that it clearly is not talked about enough because not enough people understand it yet. This idea of people really, even though we have Bitcoin and Bitcoin exists, Bitcoin is something that people cannot quite wrap their minds around yet, because we've never seen anything like it before. Now, people call it digital gold, but it's a bad comparison, right? It's similar to gold. It's the thing that we kind of have that looks a little bit like it, except you can transport it around the world at the speed of light, right? You can take it anywhere. It weighs nothing, right? You can hold 12 words in your head and nobody can take it from you, right? Nobody can crack that. And gold has, you know, worked as great as money for 5,000 years, but it's got its limitations in the information age, right? But on top of that, people don't understand Bitcoin, But then they look for things that are going, because they don't understand Bitcoin, they don't understand really what that is they could be holding. And instead of taking this sort of slow and steady, Bitcoin's not a get rich quick scheme, right? It's a build wealth slowly scheme. Sometimes it builds wealth very quickly, right? But for the most part, it's a slow grind. It spends a lot more time going sideways or going down than it does going up. There's only a few days a year where Bitcoin makes all of its gains, like 6 to 10 days a year based on Checkmate's analysis. So that's why, and I love his analysis on this because he always recommends, look, like he spends all day studying this stuff and he can't time the market. So he says, just be in the market, DCA, keep it simple. But people often, I think, don't want that simple solution, Brendan. What they want is, what's the shiny object that's going to 10x by tomorrow? And I don't want to miss out on that. And so Bitcoin, this thing where if they just held it and stacked a little bit, even a few dollars a week, you do that over the space of a few years, that adds up. And it will keep growing and growing and surprise you. Like over a year, you may be down, right? Over 2 years, you may be down. But you go to 4 years, 5 years, you will be up. And if you can take that time, if you can be patient, you will see those rewards. But it's sad because I think, and you see this exemplified so clearly with all of the prediction market stuff that is blowing up now. And if you look at the ads for this, I just I've seen a bunch of these ads for Kalshi recently, and they're just, honestly, they're disgusting. They're so incredibly predatory, making these ads. I've got to find this one later, but it was basically saying, look, Kalshi tells you what to bet on, and then you can bet and you can be guaranteed to make money. I mean, it's literally just, so it's like, well that's weird. So how are they going to make it? It's just, all this stuff is so ridiculous. Like, you can just bet on the weather. It's not raining today in LA, and I just made $300. And it's like, all of this stuff to me is just exemplifying the fact that the incentive structure is broken. The system is broken. To your point, people feel they're so underwater that they feel like they want to do anything they can to take a breath. But what they miss is, instead, they chase these shiny things. They chase whatever the new prediction market du jour is. And now everyone's got a prediction market, right? They're being built into all of the different applications. They're being built into Robinhood, right? And Robinhood is like really they're the champs at gamification of this stuff. But this is all just a symptom of the money being so broken that people, especially young people, feel that they can't possibly get ahead. So they need to do whatever they can to game that system, to gain an edge. And Bitcoin, in comparison, seems a little bit boring. Like, what do you mean? I just have to set an automatic DCA. I don't have to look at it, and I just have to kind of try to create value for society, save a little bit what I can, take care of my family, live my life, and I can just wait. And in a few years, it's going to be worth a heck of a lot more. And then in 4 years more, it's going to be worth even more, and so on and so forth. But people are too impatient for that, Brendan. I think it's this instant gratification generation, but it's pervaded not just the Zoomers and the millennials. I think it's everybody now. It's everybody who's trying to get ahead. They want instant gratification. They want a way to game the system and get ahead because the system is so broken. And it's a sad thing. I hope that it gets better, but sadly, I think it's going to get a heck of a lot worse. Like, I think we're just at the dawn of these prediction markets. I don't know where you're at with that. There's a whole lot of stuff there. I mean, more stuff than we even have time to get into around all the kind of insider stuff on there. But I don't know. I mean, do you think that this is something that, do we start to see more retail interest in Bitcoin as price starts to go back up? Or are people still just going to be so distracted by the shiny object in the room or whatever that is on any given day that they're still just missing the thing that should be so obvious that's right in front of them, which is Bitcoin?
Boy, yeah, this is such a good question, because I go back to the mindset thing I was talking about a minute ago, and people are, again, you and I, we've talked about this over time, and whether it's homeschooling, I mean, government-run schools have taught us for 100 years, hey, hear the bell, comply, conform, memorize. There's only one right answer. There's only two options. So there's one right answer. I mean, that's anything but how life works, right? Like, we're free people, made by God. We subject ourselves to a king or to a president under our own volition. I mean, that's Declaration of Independence, Constitution. This is how this works, and we've flip this around, and we all believe this lie now, that the rights come from government and things like that. So we've completely flipped the incentives of society. We've lost our faith, we've lost the money. So how can you we're in that bubble. We're like in Frozen 2, like in the haze, and you can't see out of it. The people up north, you can't see out of the haze anywhere. And to your point, I think we have to have pain. We have to have max pain in order for people to really come over and understand what's happening. Because people see like the brokenness all over the place, and maybe they still can't put their hand on the problem at times, but they know things are wrong. And I think it's just incumbent on us and all of us Bitcoiners to keep educating, because there's going to be the crypto crowd, there's going to be the gold and silver bugs, there's going to be all these people looking for answers over time. And it's incumbent on us a year from now or 6.5 years from now, when the time is right, for those people to find that information. And again, going back to our stories, and that's what I was saying earlier, like that's how I found it. I mean, I was getting in and like, I'm trying to find like what's going on here. And then I found Bitcoiners, like I found Bitcoiners on Twitter. I found Bitcoiners, like I'm doing research on online. I'm like, whoa, I didn't know people like thought like this. Like I didn't know there's other people out there like me. Like they didn't exist in the political world. Like it was just a bunch of scammers everywhere in the political world, in the red versus blue. So, 10, 15 years ago, I'm like, wow, like these people exist. Gold and silver bugs were close, but they were still missing something. And you kind of really didn't know until you saw Bitcoin, until you saw Bitcoiners. And you're like, oh, like that's what's missing. So, and you can't even explain it at times. It's just like that sense that you get, and you're like, whoa, like the Bitcoin is the life raft off the Titanic. Everything else is still denominated in US dollars. Everything still is in this system that's going down. And Bitcoin is that protocol off of the Titanic. Even though it's dark and it's late at night, it's cold water and the boat's small, it's a nascent asset class, it's scary. And again, it might sink. Like, who knows? Bitcoin may not work. There's a chance. There's a small chance. But I know 100% guaranteed that Titanic is going down, because now I've backed away and I can see that it's going down. So I know at least I have a chance in Bitcoin, where you have no chance when you're on the Titanic still. So that to me is like, we are addicted to losing. I've seen this before too. I forget what book it was, but a lot of humans are addicted. That's what gambling. Like a lot of people are addicted to losing. And again, it's like if it's self-worth or a lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, like all these things. But there's a lot of people that gamble because they're addicted to the dopamine of losing, actually. So this is part of what plays into the crypto world, and like just going back in, the Stockholm syndrome. I'm going to go back in. I'm just going to get beat over the head again. I'm just going to keep doing it. And that to me, again, we can, Walker and Brannick can talk to her blue in the face. And this is for the few people that have come out of that and come out of that fog and the haze. But a lot of these people need to get beat in the head again. And we all do in our different ways. So it's not us versus them. It's we all need to get beat over the head in different ways, and until eventually we wake up. So I think this is part of it. We go back to the 1 second decision. Once people are ready, it's the whole, the teacher appears when the student's ready. And then, here we are, and just like people for us years ago, when we were ready, then the teachers appeared and it became very clear and very obvious. So it's up to us to shift over to window. The one thing I will say too about the number go up stuff, I think shifting over to window is constantly, because again, I go back to mindset. Money is a belief structure. It's psychology. And the US dollar has nothing behind it. It's a con game, a confidence game. People, it's aircraft carriers and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. If 5% of people wake up tomorrow and have zero confidence in the dollar, guess what happens? Hyperinflation. It goes to zero at that point. It doesn't matter how many aircraft carriers, Nimitz class carriers we got out there. It doesn't matter. You can't, if all the guns in the world are pointed at someone's head, but 10%, 5%, 2% of the population doesn't have confidence in the dollar, bye, kaput, gone. And that's the thing that they're trying to, coming back full circle to all this endless FUD campaign of training you in schools, legacy media, you're laughed at Bitcoin, it's a 4-letter word, all these things. I mean, at the end of the day, you look at like the energy talk for 15, 16, 17 years, right? Since Bitcoin has been around, those have come from the highest levels of government. That wasn't, the XRP guys or all these other people, those people were paid, maybe themselves did it, but those people were paid, in my opinion, from the highest levels of society, because no one had that amount of, gusto or ability for 17 years, we'll call it maybe 12, 13 years, to be fudding the energy. Oh, it's going to boil the oceans and blah, blah, blah. If people really cared about global warming, Bitcoin mining would have been the best thing in the world to cure the issues that we had in our world. Hence, no one was doing it. And it was lauded as like, or not lauded, but it was vilified as this thing. It was like, oh, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. Now we have AI. And AI is using all kinds of energy, and now energy is great. So that, therefore, what's not being said is now the signal of, whoa. They're not saying anything about Bitcoin now. Well, it's because they found something they can control you with, that's centralized, and they want, and now energy is good. So anyway, it's a lot to say there, Walker, so I apologize, but we're in some wild times.
I love it. You and I are going to have to do another, like a deeper dive in this, because that is something that I think is so fascinating. It just so happened that the timelines really added up with the Bitcoin. And there was also, I've got to shout out to people like Daniel Batten, I think, who's been one of the biggest crusaders on the Bitcoin energy front in terms of FUD busting, like tirelessly so. I mean, God bless him, like the patience of a saint to really refute all these terrible arguments. But it did just so happen to coincide that right as AI starts, guzzling up a lot of energy, which again, like I'm all for, like there are no rich countries that don't use a lot of energy, right? Gladstone has that great graph that he showed a lot of times. But the point here, and I'll get you out of here in a second, is just that, wow, that timeline really did seem to line up conveniently where energy FUD went away, right, as AI starts spinning up. And it's like, maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's not. But, Brandon, always enjoy having you here. Where do you want to send folks? Where can folks find you if they want to hear more of your rants and get another perspective from you?
Yeah, I think it's just all Brandon_Gentili. So my first and last name, underscore in between there on Twitter, Master, YouTube, Spotify, all that stuff where the podcast is. So yeah, it's always a great time hanging with you, Walker. I appreciate it and look forward to doing it again here soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. And we will be right back. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. You'll have me for about a half hour. Then we'll be joined by Alex Leishman. He's the CEO and CTO of River. But before that, again, a quick commercial break. Brandon Gentili, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be right back here on RoxomTV. Don't touch that dial.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. The price of Bitcoin is $89,499 infinitely printable US dollars per Bitcoin. We're going to dive into a couple of other stories here. We've been talking with Brandon Gentili. He's going to actually be joining us for a little bit longer here in a moment. But before we do that, just want to recap. We've talked about Strategy's recent Bitcoin buy. They just hit over 700,000 Bitcoin on their corporate balance sheet. Trump and the Trump family having an increasing percentage of their net worth in Bitcoin and other, quote, crypto assets. 2026 Bitcoin price predictions from Strike and 21 CEO Jack Mallers, and whether or not silver and gold bugs will start to diversify into actual digital sound money, which is Bitcoin. I'm going to bring back up Brandon Gentili here in a moment. But before that, the story that we're going to cover next is around U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirming that seized Bitcoin will be added to the digital asset reserve. So the U.S. Treasury has now made its position very explicit. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed that seized Bitcoin will not be sold, but instead added to the government's digital asset reserve. Speaking in Davos during this past Davos session here, but he was talking about various U.S.-related discussions at the World Economic Forum. Bessent said, quote, "The policy of this government is to add seized Bitcoin to our digital asset reserve. He emphasized that liquidation is not the objective, signaling a clear departure from the past sell-off practices under the Biden administration. The statement comes in direct support of recent confirmation from Patrick Witt, executive director at the President's Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, who stated last week that the Bitcoin forfeited in the Samurai wallet case was not sold and will be held as part of the U.S. government's strategic reserve policy. We'll talk a little bit about that Samurai case as well with Brandon here in a moment, because it is one that needs repeating and repeating often. But together, these remarks reinforce a consistent message across senior levels of the government, which is Bitcoin seized through enforcement actions, including cases involving Tornado Cash and Samurai, is now being retained rather than liquidated, again, as was the precedent set by President Joe Biden or whoever was running the White House at that time. We're not quite sure, even though I was told he was sharp as a tack. Bessent also revealed a major monetary policy development, confirming that 4 candidates are currently being considered by President Donald Trump to replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, with a decision expected as early as next week. So taken together, this is quite a lot of signal. The U.S. government is no longer treating Bitcoin as a disposable seized asset, but as a strategic piece of sovereign capital, and simultaneously preparing for a shift in Federal Reserve leadership. To cover this with me, I'm bringing back up Brendan Gentili to the stage. Brendan, so this is really a reinforcement of something we already knew, but it's nice to see this. From Trump's executive order, again, a little feels like forever ago now, but it hasn't been that long. That executive order clearly stated that any Bitcoin acquired by the government would be held and not sold. Any crypto assets acquired by the government, and I use crypto in quotes there, would potentially be sold. They will look at budget neutral ways to acquire more Bitcoin. They will not look at any acquisitions of new crypto that is not taken through confiscatory measures. But, I'm curious what your thoughts on this are, because I'm still wondering, does this create any sort of a negative or a malincentive for the government to really look at more ways to seize Bitcoin? If they're saying, look, we're going to hold all the Bitcoin we seize, but hey, let's find more ways to seize it. Obviously, I would recommend that people, before we say anything else, go to billandkeone.org, that you sign the petition for the Samurai Wallet developers, Bill and Keone. They are currently in federal prison for the crime of writing open source software. We can get into that a little bit, but Brandon, I do want to get your thoughts. Does this create a dangerous incentive for the government? Or do you think this is really just about saying, hey, look, we're not the Biden administration. We're not going to be selling Bitcoin. What's your read on this whole thing?
Yeah, this is a great question, because it's, again, that double-edged sword we kind of talked about in the first hour, where it reminds me of the, I think it was in India, and I don't remember when it was exactly, but they had like a viper problem or whatever it was. And then the government, they started paying everyone to kill vipers basically and bring them in. So what happened? People started breeding vipers. You can't even make this stuff up, right? But like, it's government just constantly screwing things up. And it was just like they were incentivizing people to breed vipers, and then all of a sudden the problem just exploded, and you've got 10 times, 100 times as many vipers, slithering around because you incentivize people to do, So anyway, more of this whole story is that, yeah, even though I can hear Eric Cason, yelling in my ear right now, right? Yelling in our ears, like, F the state. And so it's one of those things where it's tough, because it's for permissionless money. State going to need Bitcoin, corporation's going to need Bitcoin, the individual, the family, everyone needs Bitcoin. At the same time, when you grok how important Bitcoin is, the Jason Lowry's of the world and his thesis and what he wrote about, and how we have the cyberspace is the new frontier. And you understand that Bitcoin becomes the protocol that's going to operate in that world. And we could talk about first principle, and I think, again, we all Bitcoiners talk past that sometimes, and people don't even understand why. They just think, well, there's going to be the next thing. But again, it's the first principle thinking that get us to a point where you realize there is no other thing. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin because of its properties. Bitcoin is a 4-letter word because people think of number go up and like hitting the lottery, but it's really the properties of Bitcoin in the game theory, the philosophy of life, human nature, cycles, all these things that go into it that Bitcoin teaches you, that you realize, oh my gosh, after maybe an hour or 10 hours or 100 or 1,000 hours of studying, oh, there is nothing that's going to beat Bitcoin. Nothing can beat Bitcoin. And that's where, I guess, the premise of this at the end of the day. But coming back, I wanted to note that. But yeah, the malincentive can be there of if a government groks it that much, yeah, they could be beating their citizens over the head to get their Bitcoin, to do the Bill and Keone thing, to do what happened to Ross Ulbricht, and do these things where like, oh, I've got your Bitcoin all of a sudden. So again, I think we're in that weird middle ground, like we talked about again the first hour, this bridge time between the generations, the demographic shift, the state subsiding eventually, because they will, as more people in the government have Bitcoin and starts changing them, and their family members have Bitcoin, and they start seeing the change or what's happening. The state does naturally get defunded over time. And I think to Eric Kason's point, or what we talked about, this mindset shift, the 1 second shift, once you have the study or the pain where you realize, oh, I need to just choose. It only takes 1 second to choose a money that doesn't steal from you. A lot of people still have to get to that place. There's a lot of pain and a lot of, or a lot of education we need to get through first to get to that 1 second decision for people to say, yeah, we're not doing this anymore, government. I mean, look in the Constitution. We had gold and silver in the Constitution, and we knew. We went through pain, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. Like, we understood those things at that time. Now we're in another revolutionary period. A lot of these revolutions or cycles coming together, seemingly, where people are going to be learning these lessons again. And that's really what we're going through at the end of the day. Government's learning them. Everyone's learning them. And the people are the government at the end of the day. So we are them and they are us. We just have to reestablish that and understand that these people answer to us. These other humans that we choose to let, like we said in the first hour again, we choose to let them govern over us. You answer to us. And that's what's being reestablished right now. It's just hard to see on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you know, we get up here every day and we're doing these things. So it's very hard for the average person, for all of us to see what, but when you look back 20 years from now, it's like, it becomes very obvious. Like, oh, wow, like we were going through that change. It's just hard to see at this moment.
I think that's definitely fair. It's missing the forest through the trees, right? The totalitarian forest through the statist trees, as it were. But it is interesting. I mean, and I would again recommend that everybody go to billandkeone.org and do sign that petition to really encourage President Trump to pardon the Samurai wallet developers. This is something we've covered exclusively here on Roxom. I know you've covered it on your show. I've covered it on my show as well. And something that I think all Bitcoiners need to pay, and just anyone who is a freedom-minded individual who doesn't believe that the state should be able to weaponize the justice system or the lack of justice system. This case, and it's too much for us to get into here right now, but it's one that I'm going to keep covering and keep beating the drum on, because it is really, really important if we care about, as President Trump has said many times, making America the Bitcoin, end quote, crypto capital of the world. You cannot do that if you are throwing open source developers in jail who were put in jail by a weaponized justice system at the Southern District or the Sovereign District of New York, who has also come after President Trump, mind you. But we'll continue covering that a lot more here on Roxom, and I encourage everyone to go to billandkeone.org to sign that petition and really make your voice heard. Sharing it on social media costs you absolutely nothing, and it may move the needle just a little bit, which is worth it. One of the things I want to get to when it comes into, again, government overreach here is going across the pond to our former colonizer, the United Kingdom, and Keir Starmer and the UK saying that they're going to take, quote, robust action in social media bans. So via Reuters, Britain's government has launched a wide-ranging consultation on children's use of social media, including the possibility, of banning under 16s from platforms. As Prime Minister Keir Starmer warned that young people are being pulled into, quote, a world of endless scrolling, anxiety, and comparison. Now, this move signals that the Labour government is prepared to go further than existing online safety rules, with ministers explicitly saying that a ban based on age is being examined alongside tougher age verification requirements and restrictions on platform design features such as infinite scrolling. Now, this consultation is going to examine international evidence such as Australia's ban to assess whether such a policy could work in the United Kingdom and how it could be enforced. Now, with no specific age threshold being confirmed, Starmer said the government was ready to, again, take robust action to protect children's mental health and development. How kind of him to finally start caring about the children. Ministers are also considering strong checks to verify users' age, and this is really the key point here. This is the actual signal amidst all this bluster and noise. Again, limiting addictive design features sounds great. New guidance for parents on appropriate screen time for children from age 5 to 16. Wow, thank you, Daddy Government. You are doing so much for us. But this debate is kind of reflecting these growing political concerns, apparently, that safeguards under the Online Safety Act may not go far enough, despite the government's claims that the law has already increased age checks and reduced children's exposure to harmful content. Now, officials are stressing this consultation is not a final decision, but it's a fact-finding process. with Starmer framing the issue as balancing technology's benefits against what he described as mounting evidence of harm to young people. Quote, children need space to grow, he said, adding that constant online judgment and comparison risk shaping childhood in damaging ways. Now, Brandon, what I find so freaking just hilarious about this is that, you know, Keir Starmer doesn't appear to care when it's involving children, you know, being subjected to rape gangs, and, you know, things are being brushed under the rug there. But when it comes to this, now all of a sudden, Keir Starmer in the UK cares about the children. But ultimately, the way that I look at this, Brandon, is this is all just a ruse. This is all just a red herring. This is all just a guise. What does this come down to? Age verification checks, keeping kids off social media. Well, it sounds like good if you think about it for like 2 seconds, right? But you think about it a little bit longer and you say, well, okay, age verification checks. So that means everyone's social media usage tied to a real world identity. That means you're not able to actually use things anonymously in any way. Anytime anyone wants to use anything, because if you're under 16, you of course don't have an ID, or, you know, you can't provide your ID and then get access to these platforms. It's just IDing everybody over 16, tying that to a identity. That, again, that gets tied to a eventual social credit score. Like, this is where that all leads. But at the end of the day, Brandon, I'd love your take on this, because, you know, you're somebody who obviously, you and I are both very tapped into the homeschooling world. You know, I myself was homeschooled. I know you homeschool your kids. To me, when it comes to, quote, you know, protecting kids, I view that as the parent's job, not the state's job. And I think that ultimately it is not worth it to restrict the freedoms of an entire population under the guise of protecting children. It goes back to that old meme. How would you like this wrapped? Anti-terrorism or protect the children? This is always the government's playbook, time and time again, to try and restrict freedoms under the guise of, hey, we're just trying to protect the kids. Because, of course, who would argue with protecting the kids? That's the real nefarious part of this argument. It's, if you're against this, you must be against protecting the children. How could you possibly be against protecting the children? You must be an evil person. But I'd love to get your take on this. I mean, are you with me on this, that this is just kind of a bit of a red herring? It's like a look over here, protect the kids, but in reality, it's let's ID everyone online? Or do you think perhaps Keir Starmer has turned a new leaf and suddenly actually does care about protecting children?
Boy, oh boy, Walker. Yeah, this is, I think it was like so many, I wrote down like multiple different like, you know, analogies or memes or just, you know, whatever. And it makes me think of, this is again why, you know, the line that, you know, you said for years now, it's not red versus blue, it's the state versus you, is so important. And again, it resonates with me so much because that's the world I grew up in the 2000s as a youngster, as a middle schooler and high schooler and in college. And you're fighting with people who have no basis of reality. It's constant emotional. And then I left that world because you realize eventually these people have no basis. Like, they've never read, everyone on the right or left has never read the Constitution before. They've never read the Bill of Rights. And so you eventually get to a point where, like, this is ridiculous. Like, you don't even understand. I'm arguing off this base of like logic, and you're just out here in left field. And so we have this world where emotion is the rule of the day. You know, like the arson is the firefighter. You know, so the government's constantly making these dumb decisions based on emotion, and the people are like, yeah. And then they're like, well, I've got a solution. A weak man will do. And that's the world we're living in right now, where we're in this world of like power politics is back. And then you have guys like this who, I mean, I don't know what's going on. And so it made me think of Alex Svetsky, of like, you can just see the physiognomy on some of these people. Like, you can just look at someone and be like, oh boy, they don't have it. Like, they ain't all there for many reasons. So, but again, this is the incentives of the system that have led us to this. You know, these dumb things, Band-Aids on bullet holes, constantly like, oh, we've got something wrong. We need a 1-second fix, or a quick fix. We need to put, you know, the Billy Blaze or whatever it was, the guy that did the commercials all the time with like the duct tape on the hole in the boat, you know, stuff like that, like the spray foam, whatever it is. Like, we want this like quick fix, put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, and we think we have the answer. So it's these dumb emotional decisions we've made for decades, and then we think we're gonna have this answer immediately. I mean, to your point, It's getting the emotions, the Rahm Emanuel thing of it's the never let a good crisis go to waste. And so this is the playbook forever. It's the Patriot Act. All these things have been written. They've been channeling us down these corners forever, and they keep spurring on the different revolutions that they want, and getting these laws, stripping our liberties, stripping our freedoms, because they keep getting everyone, branding everyone like we're cattle and like, ooh, like jumping around like we're all hopped up, and then we'll just pass this and like this will be good, guys. We need another omnibus bill. We need something insane with $2 trillion in spending, and then no one knows it's in it. The famous Nancy Pelosi line of, we'll find out what's in it when we pass it. When Obamacare got rammed down everyone's throats 15, 16, 17 years ago. So this is the world we live in, and this is the part where we're getting to the end line of people waking up, again, our generation, really 40, 45 and under crowd, of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, and seeing your grandparents, seeing your parents, seeing people get screwed left and right and front and center. And people just had enough. They're like, again, you said this earlier, but like, why am I going to work? Why the quiet quitting and all these different things the younger generation is doing? They're like, well, I have no hope for home ownership. I have no hope to even make anything in my life and to have anything. So why am I even working at this point? So the incentives of this system, the only way the system works with deflation and technology and what's happening is going to be on a Bitcoin protocol. It's the only way to flip the incentives and not have the state down your throat or up your you-know-what, if they can just control you in this AI panopticon. And the only incentive is therefore to keep, ringing people like they're the human battery in the Matrix, and just keep doing that more and more and more. So that is where Bitcoin comes in, this deflation, neutral money that captures deflation and redistributes that technological process back to the humans and back to the 99%, we'll say. So that to me is where we're coming to this really big, and you see all the crazy stuff. The cars are getting shut off, the heat, this stuff is coming. This new stuff, used to freak me out 15 years ago, and I'd get all worked up about it, but that's the political world. And now it's like you realize, hey, people need to get hurt. You need to prepare yourself, get your Bitcoin, run a node, educate people around you, get some food storage, get a sidearm, whatever it is. You need to get prepared. And then you feel really good. Then you sleep well at night. And then, hey, think crazy things are going to happen, but at least you're prepared at the end of the day. So it's having a low time preference, and Bitcoin is the answer to this. It's the only answer is fixing the incentive base, so we don't get to these points where you're at the end of a string. Like, what do you do when Keir Starmer is saying, hey, we're gonna have digital ID and all this stuff? What are you gonna do? You're at a point now where there's only a couple options. It's either you go physically remove him from office. We know how that's gonna play out. It's gonna be chaos, or what? So here we are.
Yeah, I mean, maybe get a couple of sidearms, maybe get a shotgun too, maybe get get yourself a Gatling gun while you're at it. Like,
under the radar way.
Yeah. But the other point here is that people, I think, often forget that Keir Starmer back in 2011 was working for the Crown Prosecution Services, and he was the one leading the prosecution and persecution of Julian Assange. This man is no friend of freedom. He is no friend of free speech. And everything that he does needs to be viewed through that lens. But I do want to get back to the sidearm piece, because it actually leads perfectly into our next story, which is that Australia right now, if we go down under to Britain's old prison colony, is looking to pass tougher hate speech and gun laws. So Australia is now on track to pass sweeping new hate speech laws and gun control laws following the Bondi shooting, after the government secured support to push revised legislation through Parliament. Now, this package cleared the House of Representatives on Tuesday and is expected to pass the Senate later in the day. It's capping an unusually high or fast-tracked response, just amid rising concerns over extremist violence and anti-Semitism. The reforms would, for the first time at a federal level, criminalize the intentional incitement of hatred, with penalties of up to 5 years in prison. Under the revised bill, prosecutors would be required to prove intent, that the person deliberately sought to incite hatred, that their actions would cause a reasonable member of a targeted group to feel harassment, intimidation, or violence. Now, legal experts told The Guardian that the intent threshold was designed to narrow the offense and protect lawful political speech, protest, and debate, like all good government legislation is, of course. But it also includes exemptions for quoting religious texts, a compromise that helped win opposition backing, but has drawn criticism from some Jewish groups and civil liberties advocates. But beyond these speech laws, the package significantly tightens firearms oversight, already quite tight there in Australia. It strengthens import controls, expands intelligence sharing between federal and state authorities, and revives a national gun buyback scheme announced in the immediate aftermath of the Bondi attack. Now, while the details of the buyback programs, such as the cost, scope, and eligible firearms, have yet to be fully outlined, the government is aiming at removing high-risk weapons from circulation and closing loopholes that allow firearms to enter Australia illegally. some gun owner groups are saying that they're questioning whether this federal buyback program is necessary, given Australia already has some of the world's strictest gun laws, and argue the Bondi attack would not clearly have been prevented by these new measures. So this to me is again one of these stories that it's like you've seen this movie before, and if we go back to the UK, you've got people talking about how do we prevent all the knife attacks in the UK because they don't have guns. I mean, they have a couple guns. You can get like a certain permit if you're like a lord or a lady, but mainly a lord, to have a gun that you can go for fox hunting or whatever whatever ridiculous stuff they do over there in our former colonizer. But because they don't have guns, they don't have a lot of gun attacks, right? It's amazing. But they have a ton of knife attacks. But oh my gosh, how do we stop the knife attacks? Well, they've proposed blunting the knives, blunting kitchen knives, because people can't stop stabbing each other, apparently. And this is, again, you go to Australia, some of the strictest gun control laws in the world. They're extremely strict, right? But somehow these things happen. It's just a great example of the fact that if somebody wants to it's not the tool that commits the crime. It's not the gun. It's not the knife. It's not the van that somebody drives through a crowded Christmas market that commits the crime, right? You're not going to ban vans, although maybe they'll get close. But it's the person who commits the crime, right? And ultimately, all of these things seek to restrict basic what should be rights of citizens. Sadly, in places like the UK, Australia, many other countries in the world, they do not have basic rights to keep and bear arms. You look at a place like Switzerland, though, some of the highest per capita gun ownership in the world and the lowest gun crime. So the problem ultimately isn't the guns, it's the people wielding them, right? But Brendan, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I mean, is Australia, they've already got their under 16 social media ban. It looks like they're bringing in more, hate speech laws. Hate speech laws are a slippery slope because ultimately, if you can be offended by something, it can be considered hate. And now even stricter gun laws. I don't know how you can get too much stricter, but I don't know. For me, I look at this and I say this is ultimately just disarming your citizenry, making any form of speech that the government doesn't like illegal, and leaving you as a citizen completely defenseless in the face of criminals who are going to remain armed because criminals will find a way, and a state who is extremely heavily armed. But I'd like to get your take on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It's, Cain killed Abel with a rock. If someone wants to kill someone, you're like, what are we doing here? And this goes back to like I feel like this hour and a half has been a lot of the first principle thinking and everything we've been talking about, and a lot of these stories looping into each other. So I think this should be signal for the average person. That's kind of like, these things all kind of come back to the incentives and like the way society is structured and they were formed. Because again, the laws only affect the good people. Newsflash. Like, if you're a good person, you're gonna follow. Oh, okay, I'll follow that law. I mean, have you noticed all the shootings generally happen in America in gun-free zones, places you can't carry a firearm, have a CPL, a concealed pistol license, or they're in a gun-free school zone. So all these areas are soft targets now: churches, schools, bars, theaters, places you cannot have them. So what do good people do? They say, well, I'm not going to do that. Society said we can't do that. The bad guy says, what do you think? Oh, I'm going to follow the law too? Of course not. So Australia had a gun buyback program in the last like 5 or 10 years. Apparently, again, once the toothpaste is out of the tube and you have guns everywhere, that means good people need guns. That means you need to get armed. You need to figure out what's going on and protect yourself and practice. A good, honest, decent society is an armed society. So this is how the game works, and we're forgetting game theory in this world. That's how game theory works, or maybe the prisoner's dilemma in that sense. So they only hurt the good people. These laws, you can't. And I think one of the other things too is you can't. We talked about Get Prepared a minute ago. You can't go over there. There's a lady, and I forget her name. I think she just died in the last like 10 years, but she was in the Holocaust. And they had asked her, she was helping all these people come from concentration camps, etc. And she was asked, at one point, like, how are you such a hero? And she was just like, well, I wasn't a hero by saving these people or feeding them or whatever it was. She's like, I just chose not to go over the cliff with the rest of society. And this can happen in many ways. And we see a lot of society going over the cliff, going to the next thing, the current thing, some trend or whatever it is. And that's not being rooted in fundamental first principles. And so now you have society going over the cliff, doing these dumb things, layering on bad decision after bad decision. And so now you have people going over the cliff. And then if you're sitting there, and Judge Napolitano has a YouTube show, and I forget one of the quotes, but it's like, it's basically like, it's, truth is treason when the way of life is lying, in essence, right? Like when you're history. Trust yourself, do your homework, know your history. The broken families over time, the bad economic politics and policies over the decades. This is what causes the depression, the illegal and legal drug usage, all these things, incentives on incentives. Well, I'm going to give these people bad things, but, I'm paid to do it. I'm going to give someone a jab because I'm paid to do it. So all these incentives in society, people, again, they want these quick answers, but we know that is not how this is fixed. It's not fixed in one little policy here and there. So at the end of the day, the only reason the government cannot do whatever it wants is because its citizens are armed. And that's really should be the moral of this whole story. And it's having good society based on those rooted in those fundamentals, fixing the money so that it can fix these incentives. So these aren't even a question. Again, going back to digital IDs or the gun buyback programs, if people weren't going off the cliff because we're doing dumb things, layered on dumb things, then you start changing this. But how do we change that? It's the incentives of society is getting back to those first principles of having a sound and just money at the end of the day. You can't have good fruit from a bad tree.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And maybe one last thing before we let you go here and cut to a commercial break, but it's the fact that you always hear in the U.S. at least this argument. Well, back when the Second Amendment was first written, they didn't have they didn't have the powerful guns that we have now. They didn't. You couldn't have that as a citizen. Well, the reality is the government didn't have those either. The Second Amendment made it so that the citizen could have exactly what the government could have. You were actually on an equal playing field to the government. So, I mean, I should honestly be able to have a B-2 bomber is what I'd like to say. I think we should be able to be on a level playing field. That would be sweet. Don't have a pilot's license, but man, sounds amazing.
I'll take it.
But Brendan, we'll let you go here. Appreciate you staying with us. Always great to have you here on RoxomTV. And again, everybody check out Brendan_Gentili wherever you get your podcasts or your social media fed to you. And appreciate your time here very much. We're going to be back in just one moment here. We're going to have Alex Leishman, the CEO and CTO of River, joining us as well. But in the meantime, do check out Brandon wherever you happen to get your podcast and social media. Brandon, really appreciate you being here. This was a fascinating conversation and looking forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks so much, Walker. It was an absolute blast. Can't wait till next time.
All right, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back in just a moment on RoxomTV.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I am here every Tuesday with you from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We just had Brandon Gentili on the show. The price of Bitcoin is currently 89,381 infinitely printable US dollars per Bitcoin. We've been talking about Bitcoin. We've been talking about UK censorship laws. We've been talking about 2026 outlooks, silver surging, Trump and his family becoming a heck of a lot richer thanks to Bitcoin and, quote, crypto, and a whole lot more. We've got a lot of other stories here for you coming up. We're going to dive right into them. And then in a few moments, we're also going to have Alex Leishman, the CEO and CTO of River, joining us here on RoxomTV. But until then, we're going to cover a couple of more stories here that I think you're going to find quite interesting. So the first one is around Iran's internet shutdown. And right now it is currently deepening, and it is also deepening the economic pain that business owners and citizens in the country are feeling. So in Iran, the sweeping internet shutdown is now nearing 2 weeks of ongoing time, and it's intensifying the economic fallout from the country's violent crackdown on nationwide protests. I'm sure everybody has seen and heard the reporting here on RoxomTV and otherwise about those protests. But this has really been choking off income for businesses that are already battered by incredible inflation and hyperinflation of the Iranian rial and a generally just collapsing economy, and thanks to that, currency collapse. Now, authorities cut off internet access on January 8th as demonstrations spread across the country, leaving only limited access to domestic websites and partial search functionality with no clear timeline for restoration. Small businesses that rely on platforms like Instagram and Telegram are reporting devastating losses. One Tehran pet shop owner told the Associated Press that his sales have dropped by 90% since the blackout as government-promoted domestic apps failed to attract customers. Now, the shutdown compounds an already dire economic situation. The Iranian rial, again, has plunged to around 1.4 million to the dollar. Inflation is surging, and recent fuel price changes have further strained household budgets. Officials acknowledge the damage. Iran's communications ministry estimates that the blackout is costing between 2.8 million and 4.3 million per day, with internet watchdog NetBlocks put the figure a heck of a lot higher at $37 million daily. Researchers say that previous internet disruptions during protests cost the economy billions, with social media-driven commerce once generating hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Now, beyond lost revenue, prosecutors have begun targeting businesses accused of supporting protests, moving to seize assets of dozens of cafes and threatening athletes and cultural figures. With consumer confidence shattered and tens of thousands reportedly arrested, many shops remain open but empty, as Iranians focus on basic necessities only. This is really just a horrific story, and it's a great example, although an incredibly sad example, of what happens when the government controls all of the communication channels. And this is the case in most countries, right? This is the case basically in every country, that the government has the ability to shut down the internet. They have the ability to cut you off from the internet, from basic communication with your fellow citizens. And this especially happens during times of protest. Something that I've covered extensively on this show and we've covered on RoxomTV is around the Uganda elections, where again, the government of Uganda, the dictator there, shut off the internet ahead of the elections over fears of course, misinformation and disinformation and all the usual buzzwords. But the reality is that the authorities, the governments that are currently in charge, do not want citizens to be able to organize and to collectively communicate with each other, because heaven forbid they start to spread the truth about what's really happening with each other and with the outside world. Now, this is just a great example of also why peer-to-peer technologies and offline non-internet-based technologies like Jack Dorsey's BitChat, ported over to Android by open source developer Kali, are so important. We've seen an upsurge in BitChat usage in Uganda. We've seen it in Iran as well. You see it in every country where authorities try to shut off the internet. You also see VPN applications on the rise. You see any sort of encrypted messaging application spike in usage, but BitChat, which rocketed to the #1 position on the Uganda App Store charts, doesn't require any internet or any personal information to sign in and use the application. This is really the power of it. And this is one of the reasons why the Ugandan government was trying to cast aspersions on BitChat, saying they could shut it down, but they couldn't. Governments can shut down the internet. What they cannot shut down, they can shut down your access to the internet, I should say, in that local jurisdiction, but they cannot shut down peer-to-peer open source technologies like BitChat or like Bitcoin or like Nostr. These are incredibly, incredibly important technologies for anyone who is trying to resist a tyrannical regime, but not just for countries that are in open revolution. They're also important technologies to utilize for people in countries like the United Kingdom or in Australia or anywhere where there are intense laws around speech and around open communication, and where authorities, like we saw in Canada, for example, a supposedly democratic Western nation, where they shut off during the Canadian trucker protests the access to the banking and financial system for the Canadian truckers who were peacefully protesting, as is their right, but they were shut off from the financial system. And this is ultimately the first tool of any tyrannical totalitarian government. If they want to shut you up, instead of just silencing you with a bullet, it's a lot more effective and a lot quicker and a lot less publicly, let's say, inconvenient to shut you off from the financial system first, because that shuts you off from everything. If the state controls your money, the state controls you. If the government can shut you off from the financial system, they can shut you off from everything. People tend not to realize this. They tend to think that in supposedly democratic Western nations like the US or like Canada or the United Kingdom or France, that of course the government wouldn't do something like that. But of course the government will, and the government does, and the government has, and the government will continue to. This is not something that is going to go away. This is not something that is going to stop. Ultimately, anywhere that centralized control can be exerted on the communication channels, you have the potential for abuse by totalitarian governments. This is the sad reality. It's not going to change, but what has changed is the ability of citizens to be able to resist this totalitarian overreach. Citizens that now have the ability to resist this through open source, decentralized technologies like Bitcoin, like BitChat, like Nostr, like completely near perfect privacy eCash, Chaumian eCash on Cashew on top of Bitcoin, like Fedimint, and that Fedi is building a ton of solutions around for encrypted communications and encrypted money. These are incredibly important tools for people to be aware of, but it's not just enough to be aware of these tools. You have to actually use them. You have to actually make it a point to use these tools before you desperately need them, because when you desperately need them, it may be too late to figure them out. So much better, no matter where you live in this world, whether it's Iran, Uganda, the UK, Canada, or the United States, where I personally reside, it is still a very good idea for you to familiarize yourself with these tools, familiarize yourself with how to use them as much as you can. And then when you really do need them, you will be prepared. And this is something that, again, I would encourage everybody to do, much like training with a firearm if you're in the United States, not if you're many other places in the world. It is a very good idea to be able to be competent with these tools and be able to realize their power so that when you desperately need them, you can use them. Another place where there is some serious turmoil happening is in Venezuela right now. And a lot of Venezuelans have turned to USDT, that is Tether stablecoin, as their government continues to wobble. So as Venezuela's both economy and government is in the midst of turmoil after the removal of dictator Nicolas Maduro, millions of citizens are turning to Tether's dollar-pegged stablecoin USDT as a financial lifeline. With access to dollars limited and the local banking system unreliable, to say the least, USDT is increasingly used for everyday payments, savings, and remittances. In many cases, it functions as a digital dollar just circulating through peer-to-peer markets, messaging apps, and crypto wallets, and Bitcoin wallets, as well as a place in place of cash or bank transfers, and often far more convenient. Now, if we look at this a little more broadly, this shift isn't just limited to households. CNBC has reported that Venezuela's state oil sector has also relied on USDT for international transactions, using stablecoins to bypass sanctions, frozen accounts, and slow correspondent banking rails. That has pushed basically these stablecoins deeper into the country's economic infrastructure, blurring the lines between informal survival money and state-level finance. But the takeaway here is very clear. In countries where fiat systems fail, Bitcoin and stablecoin adoption is a necessity. While stablecoins like USDT dominate day-to-day usage, the story really reinforces a broader Bitcoin thesis, which is when trust in governments and currencies breaks down, people migrate to open, borderless monetary networks. This is something that we've seen time and time again. It's why Bitcoin adoption, both as a store of value, but also very importantly, as a medium of exchange, is so widespread in the global south, in areas where they do not have the exorbitant privilege of having the world's reserve currency, the US dollar, in areas where it is very common to see your currency just devalued at the drop of a hat overnight. This is something that in the United States, we're not so used to. We're more used to the slow, steady bleed over years and decades of our currency devaluating as the Federal Reserve prints money out of thin air. But in places where the US dollar is viewed as a true store of value, because their local currency is so very much worse. Again, I think it's important to remember that the dollar may be terrible, but it's still better than all the rest, right? It's the skinniest kid at fat camp. It's the prettiest horse at the glue factory. Yes, it may be the worst, guys, for Bitcoiners. The dollar's the worst, but it's still better than all the rest. And this is why stablecoin usage is also so widespread alongside Bitcoin in economies, in countries, in jurisdictions where, again, their currency is completely subject to the whims of a centralized central bank within their country. Or even worse, to look at the 16 African nations who are subject to the whims of the CFA franc, not even a currency that their central banks control, but one controlled by France. This is neo-colonialist money, in my opinion. This is something that's incredibly despicable, but that is something that they don't even have control as a country of their own currency. And a country that doesn't have that kind of control can't possibly be very sovereign now, can they? And their people are ultimately the one who pay the price, right? As resources are strip mined from these countries under the guise of some sort of economic development or, modernization or greenwashing that the IMF and the World Bank propagate and reinforce, these countries are systemically raped by these foreign powers that use a form of neo-colonialist money to be able to extract the natural wealth of these countries and exchange, give them a currency that they can devalue at the drop of a hat. So we're going to continue to see more of this happening. Sadly, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but there are lifelines for people. You may not like stablecoins as a Bitcoiner, but I can tell you from having talked to a lot of people who actually live, in the global South, that USDT is viewed as a genuine store of value, as a lifeline, and as something that is a heck of a lot better than what they have to deal with on a national level. So again, this is the reality of life that is not a, quote, first world country where we do not have the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar as our reserve currency. Now, moving on here, we've got a few more stories to cover here and I want to get into a number of them. But to move back to the home front, and speaking of the Federal Reserve and the exorbitant privilege of the US to have the dollar as the reserve currency, whether or not that benefits American citizens in the long run remains to be seen. Right now, it's not actually looking so good, but still, again, the dollar's the worst, but it's better than all the rest. But coming from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, the Fed chair pick could come as early as next week. So via Bloomberg, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said President Donald Trump could announce his pick for the next chair of the Federal Reserve as early as next week, accelerating a closely watched decision that has taken on additional political and market significance. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Bessent said that the process has narrowed to 4 finalists after months of deliberation, with the White House eager to settle leadership at the central bank and economic uncertainty amid heightened scrutiny of the Fed. This shortlist is widely seen as a 4-way race between BlackRock fixed income chief Rick Ryder, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, current Fed Governor Christopher Waller, and former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh. Bessent, who has overseen the search, said all 4 candidates are, quote, fantastic, but noted that internal dynamics have shifted. Hassett has long been viewed as a frontrunner, though Trump recently suggested he may prefer to keep him as in his current role as a key economic spokesperson, complicating assumptions about what the final choice will be. This decision comes against the backdrop of the Justice Department's subpoena to the Federal Reserve over a probe into its building renovation and Chair Jerome Powell's testimony to Congress, injecting uncertainty into the confirmation process. The move has triggered backlash on Capitol Hill, including from Republican Senator Thorne Tillis, who has warned that he may oppose any Fed nomination until the investigation is resolved. The episode has raised questions about Fed independence and could influence both timing and viability of Trump's eventual pick, with some officials suggesting Ryder may face fewer obstacles in a Senate confirmation fight. Now, this is all, I think, just very emblematic of where we are currently at in the late stage fiat empire, right? We have basically jockeying and posturing and speculation around who is going to run the group of unelected banker bureaucrats, the cabal of unelected banker bureaucrats that get to set the price of money and decide how much money they are going to print out of thin air, debasing the currency and causing a silent tax on everyone who is a holder of that currency, whether foreign or domestic. And ultimately, this is one of those times where I'm just reminded again and again and again of why we need Bitcoin. Bitcoin, the first free market for money that has ever existed, actually enables us to have a free market for everything else. Now, the United States has done a better job than any other country in the world of enabling a true free market, enabling as close to a capitalist system as we've seen. But again, it can't be a truly free market if we don't have a free market for money. And this is really a key point here. It's that if a group of unelected banker bureaucrats set the price of money, the interest rate, and control how much money is keystroked into the economy, how many extra zeros are added, well, then we can't possibly have a true free market in everything else, because money is the ultimate signal. Price is the ultimate signal. If you are constantly distorting that price signal by distorting the free market for money, because there isn't a free market for money, you can't possibly have accurate signals everywhere else. And this is why the Fed plays a constant back and forth swinging pendulum game of trying to figure out how much to correct, then how much they're going to overcorrect. Then once they've overcorrected, how much they're going to walk that back, how slowly they're going to walk that back. Are they going to raise interest rates faster than usual, slower than usual? Will they increase the M2 money supply, or will they keep it the same? Are they going to piss off or not piss off their big banking buddies? Or is this just going to be a one-way ticket to ultimate dollar debasement, which has been the trend forever, basically since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, after the now infamous meeting at Jekyll Island in the years prior to that. So let's see what happens with this new Fed pick. Ultimately, we know that Jerome Powell, I don't envy the man. Whatever you think of him, I think that the Fed chair has probably one of the worst jobs in the world. Now, granted, you get very rich from this job, and there's a revolving door between the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, and Wall Street. It's why you saw folks like Janet Yellen, who served as Federal Reserve Chair, move into her role as Treasury Secretary, even though apparently Fed independence is something you care about. But I guess you can be Treasury Secretary and Chair of the Fed, and that's not any concern there. But then she, of course, moves to lucrative speaking gigs on Wall Street, because this is just how this revolving door of DC and Wall Street works, right? The backs scratch themselves. Everybody closest to the money printer continues to get richer. And who pays the price? Well, it's the American people at the end of the day. And ultimately, I think that the American people are sick and tired of this. I know that I am. I'm sick and tired of a group of unelected banker bureaucrats getting to set the price of money, getting to decide how much of my hard-earned money they are going to steal through inflation, which is that it is truly what it is, right? This is theft. This is absolute theft. You work hard for money that a central bank prints for free. I'm sorry, but that to me is just completely unacceptable. And it's one of the reasons I am so glad that Bitcoin exists and Bitcoin fixes this. Now, not at a national level, right? But it does fix this at the individual level. And that is ultimately what matters. It matters that people have a credible exit. It matters that people have a way to escape fiat debasement. It matters that people have a way to transact peer to peer. It matters that people have a way to step outside of the existing broken incentive financial system and use a money that has been completely separated from state, right? We have a money that is completely separate from the government. They can't just print more Bitcoin at a whim. They will always print more dollars. They can never print more Bitcoin. And that is the important point here. That is the reason Bitcoin is so powerful. It also helps that you can transfer Bitcoin anywhere around the world at the speed of light and nobody can stop you. But really, at its core, now Bitcoin needs to be a store of value and a medium of exchange for it to truly be successful, in my humble opinion. But really, we need to make sure that the store of value piece comes first. It needs to be a money that cannot be debased, because the debasement of currency is ultimately what leads to societal destruction. It is what leads to revolution. Nearly every, and I'll say nearly just because I don't like to be an absolutist, but nearly every revolution in history is not necessarily a cultural revolution, a societal revolution. It starts as a monetary revolution. The destruction of society starts with the destruction of money, with the debasement of currency. It starts with inflation. And it ends with societal destruction. It ends with the disintegration of the social contract. It ends with violence. This is what we're seeing in Iran right now, where again, the rial went from something like 40 or 50 rial to USD back in right before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And now is at 1.4 million rial to USD. That's at the same time as the US currency has inflated massively, right? So not only is the US dollar getting weaker and weaker and weaker, it's purchasing less and less and less over that 50 plus year period. But the real has gotten weaker and weaker and weaker versus the US dollar. It is hyperinflated versus the US dollar, which again is the global reserve currency. And what's happening? Now, it doesn't help that in Iran you have Sharia law, which it turns out people don't like, especially women who could have predicted that. It's truly shocking. Nobody could have seen this coming. But ultimately, this is what you get. When you destroy the currency, you destroy society. When you debase the currency, you debase society. This is stealing from people. And so back to the story with Treasury Secretary Bessent talking about the Federal Reserve Chair. Personally, I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less who who Donald Trump proposes for the Federal Reserve Chair, because it doesn't matter. Because in the words of Lynn Alden, nothing stops this train. Fiscal dominance is real. They need to keep spending. The interest expense on the national debt is over $1 trillion a year. Nothing stops this train. They will always have to print more money. There is no way out of this hole. The only thing they can do is to continue to kick the can down the road, to continue to print ad infinitum forever. That's it. That's the only thing they can do. It's the only tool they have in their playbook. Manipulate interest rates and print money out of thin air. And print they will. In the words of Lawrence Lepard, the big print is coming. I would recommend that you protect yourself with Bitcoin. But hey, this is not financial advice here on RoxomTV. This is monetary advice, right? I'm not giving you financial advice in any way. But this is monetary advice. This is about what money is the best money. We know that every fiat currency will be debased. It always will be debased and always will continue to be debased. Every fiat currency eventually returns to its marginal cost of production, which is zero. Remember that Bitcoin is your measuring stick. Bitcoin is how you opt out. Bitcoin is your credible exit from this broken fiat system. So if you don't have any Bitcoin, don't worry, because there's still time. We're still languishing with Bitcoin under 90,000 infinitely printable, infinitely debasable, infinitely inflatable US dollars per Bitcoin. So you still have time to get yourself some. And it might make sense to get some just in case it catches on. We'll see. We're going to be right back here on RoxomTV in just one moment. We're going to go to a commercial break. I hope we still have Alex Leishman here joining us here in a second, the CEO and CTO of River. If not, you'll still be right here with me, and we'll wait for Alex to arrive. But again, this is Walker America on RoxomTV. We will be right back after a quick commercial break. Don't touch that dial. I'll see you soon.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I'm here with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The price of Bitcoin is currently $89,705 infinitely printable US dollars per Bitcoin. We've covered a lot so far in today's show. We're going to keep covering a heck of a lot more. We may be joined, I'm waiting to hear, by River CEO and CTO Alex Leishman here in a moment. I'll keep you posted on that as I find out more. But in the meantime, we've got a lot of other stories to cover. So one of the ones that we talked about briefly earlier, but do want to get back into a little bit because I do think it is very relevant and really is just a sign of the times that we're in right now as it relates to Bitcoin adoption, both at the corporate and individual level. But that is Michael Saylor's strategy now holding over 700,000 Bitcoin. Yes, you heard that right. Over 700,000 Bitcoin. Strategy has added another massive Bitcoin purchase to its balance sheet. They acquired 22,305 BTC for roughly $2.1 billion at an average price near $95,300 per coin. The buy was funded through ongoing equity and preferred stock issuance, continuing the firm's aggressive accumulation strategy. And you've got to say, the amount you have to say strategy when you talk about strategy is truly incredible. I've got to say, what a heck of a rebrand there. They were very intentional, I think, when they made that shift from MicroStrategy to just good old-fashioned strategy. Now, that pushes Strategy's total holdings to 709,715 Bitcoin, worth about $63.8 billion at current prices. Now, Bitcoin, of course, is capped at 21 million coins. The company now controls roughly 3.4% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist, a level of ownership that is unmatched by any other public firm. Now, on Sunday, Michael Saylor hinted at this move with his now familiar orange dot tracker. He's also added a couple of green dots to that tracker in recent months, but posting just 2 words on Sunday with bigger orange. Now, this $2.1 billion Bitcoin purchase certainly fits that description. The Bitcoin network now produces approximately 450 BTC per day, or just over 3,100 Bitcoin per week. Strategy's latest purchase alone represents more than 7 weeks of global Bitcoin mining supply absorbed in just a single move. Now, if Saylor averages $500 million in purchases per week, at roughly today's prices, Strategy will end 2026 holding 1 million Bitcoin, which would be a truly incredible thing to see. Again, this puts them ahead of any sovereign nation as well, not just ahead of publicly traded companies. And I think an important thing to highlight here is that regardless of how you feel about a publicly traded company acquiring this much Bitcoin, right? This is inevitable. It is inevitable that every company in the world, whether publicly traded or private, eventually holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet because it just makes sense. It's inevitable that every country, every sovereign in the world eventually holds Bitcoin in its reserves because it just makes sense. It's inevitable that as many individuals as is possible hold Bitcoin personally because it just makes sense. Corporate Bitcoin adoption, nation state Bitcoin adoption, individual citizens retail adoption, this just means one thing. It means Bitcoin is winning. This was inevitable if Bitcoin was going to be successful. This is what Bitcoin being successful looks like. If Bitcoin was not successful, people wouldn't care. You don't see any companies or countries holding XRP on their balance sheet, besides, of course, the Ripple Corporation, when they're not using it to fund disinformation campaigns against Bitcoin, financed with $5 million from Chris Larson. But hey, I digress. Again, the point here is that this is what we expect when Bitcoin is winning. And Bitcoin is winning. Bitcoin will continue to win. Ultimately, my hope is that as much as we see this institutional adoption from like the folks at MicroStrategy and many other publicly traded firms now, we see more individual or quote retail adoption as well. Ultimately, the power that Bitcoin gives, yes, it can help the nation state's balance sheet. Yes, it can help the corporation's balance sheet. But most importantly, it can help the individual and the family's balance sheet. That's where Bitcoin's true power lies. And I hope that we continue to see more retail adoption in that regard. Another story here on the topic of Bitcoin, but also the quote crypto world, is around the Trump family fortune's increasing ties to Bitcoin and quote crypto. Now, via Bloomberg, a growing share of the Trump family's estimated $6.8 billion net worth is now linked to Bitcoin and quote crypto ventures. According to Bloomberg, digital assets have moved from the margins to the center of the family's balance sheet. The report highlights how crypto initiatives, including token projects, licensing deals, and digital collectibles, NFTs, have become meaningful revenue drivers for the Trump family. One of the key vehicles is the World Liberty Financial. It's a crypto-linked project tied to Trump allies alongside multiple Trump-branded NFT drops that generated tens of millions in sales and fees. Bloomberg notes that these crypto efforts often require far less upfront capital than real estate, while offering asymmetric upside. It is a beautiful thing when you can print the token out of thin air. That's what the Federal Reserve does, after all. So, hey, why not try what is already known to be a winning strategy, right? And the shift also reflects a political and financial convergence as President Donald Trump positions himself as openly pro-Bitcoin and, quote, crypto friendly on the campaign trail ahead of the last election. The family's economic exposure increasingly aligns with policies favoring digital assets over traditional financial intermediaries. This also probably has something to do with the fact that the traditional financial system, more recently, as Trump became a little bit less popular amidst certain crowds, was debanked and sort of targeted by some of these traditional financial institutions. Now, at the same time, this explosion of short-lived crypto and token projects has created unnecessary noise. This makes it harder for everyday investors to distinguish Bitcoin from the broader crypto casino. The distinction really does matter. Eric Trump has made multiple appearances at Bitcoin conferences over the past year, and by all indications, he does seem to understand the difference between Bitcoin as a monetary network and various speculative token experiments, even when they're pushed by his own family members. Projects like the American Bitcoin Company stand out because they're simple, they're durable, there's long-term alignment with Bitcoin's core principles. This is about Bitcoin mining in America, right? Now, everything else, the tokens, the World Liberty Financial platforms, the various crypto narratives, they will likely continue to churn and fade as political cycles shift and Trump's influence evolves. But Bitcoin native companies built on sound money foundations are positioned to endure. Hopefully, this is just a shitcoin phase for the Trump family. I know if you look at the price chart of the Trump and Melania tokens, you'll see that it did not go well for anybody except the insiders, which is how every, quote, crypto project ultimately goes. But at the end of the day, I would hope that people are able to distinguish Bitcoin from crypto more in the coming years. Sadly, that proves to be a very difficult task. We all know and probably had conversations with family members, friends, acquaintances in the physical real world, in the meat space, where they find out that you are interested in Bitcoin. You're playing with your Bitcoins, as Trump would say. And what did they do? Well, they say, oh, Bitcoin, like that Sam Bankman-Fried thing, right? They continuously conflate Bitcoin and crypto because the media conflates Bitcoin and crypto. So a lot of this comes down to just education, right? Educating people that Trump coin or Melania coin, that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. That Trump has nothing to do with Bitcoin. Trump has no control over Bitcoin. He cannot do anything to Bitcoin or anything with Bitcoin that the average Bitcoin pleb user can do. And that is the beauty of Bitcoin. He may be able to print his own Trump tokens or his wife's Melania tokens out of thin air, but he can't print more Bitcoin out of thin air. He may be able to propose a new Federal Reserve chair, but there is no Federal Reserve chair for Bitcoin. There's no Bitcoin chair. There's no Bitcoin governing body. There's no group of centralized, unelected banker bureaucrats who gets to control how much Bitcoin gets printed. So ultimately, crypto is fiat on steroids. Crypto is what happens when not just a central bank can print money out of thin air, but when anybody can print money out of thin air. Crypto is what happens when you have the worst excesses, the worst incentive models of fiat, and now anybody can basically stand as close to the money printer as they want. Anybody can be a cantillionaire in the fiat world. And ultimately, again, I hope that people begin to see more of the difference between Bitcoin and the quote crypto world, but it seems that more people may need to get burned before that actually happens. So moving on to one of our next stories here is around Jack Mallers. He's got a new price prediction out for 2026. Specifically, he thinks Bitcoin's going to around 200K. Now, we covered this a little bit earlier on the program, but I do want to rehash it a little bit. And I'll tell you exactly why, and we'll weave this into a bit of a larger narrative. But I'll give you the background of it first, because the narrative for 2026 has shifted a bit. The price debate's heating up, macro expectations and institutional demand appear to be colliding, and Jack Mallers, the CEO of Strike and 21, says Bitcoin could reach 150 to 200K in 2026. In a recent video, he argued that the interest rates are likely to move lower, agreed. Governments will lean back into money printing, agreed. And political pressure around the US midterm elections will favor looser financial conditions. But he cautioned that Bitcoin could see a short-term dip in the meantime before resuming its climb higher. So Mallers is bullish. I'm also bullish too, Jack. We've seen a lot of other bullish predictions coming out. Our own RoxomTV host, Susie Violet Ward, did an analysis of various price predictions, everything from 120K to 170K throughout 2026. It's driven by the usual suspects of ETF inflows, institutional adoption, Bitcoin post-halving supply dynamics, you name it. It's been said before. It'll be said again. But we see a lot of big institutions having similar price predictions to Mallers. And I don't always like to dwell on price predictions, but I'll tell you why I'm doing it now. It's because I think it's important for the larger narrative. NGU, number go up, is ultimately what drives the vast amount of adoption in terms of retail adoption in the Bitcoin world. When people see Bitcoin's price pumping, they tend to finally get on board, right? Nobody wants Bitcoin when it's cheap. Nobody wants Bitcoin when it's dipping. People want Bitcoin when it's nearing new all-time highs. They want it when the FOMO kicks in. They want it when it's probably going to take a little cool-off period afterwards. And I am just hearing now that we may have Alex Leishman will be able to join us here in just a moment. So that's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and bring him up on the stage because I do want to get his take on this as we look at the outlook for 2026. So I'll go ahead and bring Alex up. Alex, welcome to the stage. Alex is the founder, CEO, and CTO of River Financial, a place where I would like to clarify, disclaimer, I am not sponsored by River. I have no affiliation. However, I do really like it as a customer. And Alex, first of all, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me on.
So I was actually looking, Alex, I realized that I started using River a little bit before the last presidential election. And I was looking at because you guys have really nice visualizations on there. Again, no affiliation with you guys. Very happy customer though. And I was looking at the visualization for, where am I at for my cost basis? And it just finally went back up I'm in the black again, because I DCA every hour. I've got, multiple DCA buys set up because I like to spread it out, right? Smash buy when I can. Okay. But as we look at this, and I like to talk to you about this because you've got a great inside view into kind of what these larger trends are. But I was talking earlier about just the, Mallers has some predictions that we're going to, 200K this year. It's a little bit down from his prediction for what 2025 was, but everyone readjusted, right? Because 2025 was a strange year. We like to think in terms of long terms with Bitcoin, longer time scales, but let's be honest, short-term price action is what brings a lot of people into Bitcoin. They come for the NGU. So I'd love to know sort of what you're seeing behind the scenes at River. Are there any trends that are kind of perking up for you? And just what's your outlook for kind of the more near-term future for 2026? What are you guys seeing kind of behind the curtain?
Yeah, good question. So I can share a few interesting data points. Last quarter, Q4 of 2025, was our highest volume quarter by far. There was a lot of net buying, but I will say we probably saw more sells in that quarter than we have in the past. Some of that was driven probably by end of year locking in capital losses. So tax optimization, that was certainly a decent chunk of it. But overall, we still saw strong net buying in Q4. The trend we're seeing right now is volumes continue to be strong, but new signups are slowing down. So sort of the number of new people that are coming into Bitcoin are slowing down. And honestly, that makes sense because usually, like you just said, newcomers to Bitcoin are typically driven by the price moving and generating some news going, hey, I should look into this now. But we are seeing a steady stream of people continuing to come in. It's just not nearly as pronounced as it would be if the price was going up. So what do I think is going to happen in 2026? I'm not really in the business of predicting price. What I always say is, if I could predict the Bitcoin price, I would just run a hedge fund. And I never have to deal with customer service. So what I think is that I think in terms of multiple scenarios. At River, I always think in terms of worst case because that's what we need to plan for. So I'm sort of mentally preparing that the first half of this year is going to be somewhat slow. That's just the vibe I get. I don't have some silver bullet data point that says that's definitely going to happen. Just the vibe I get. But I would be surprised if we didn't see some sort of turnaround and momentum uptick in, starting towards some point in the summer. The reason I get that sense is markets are very complex. I can't explain why the Bitcoin price was so flat last year, given all of the good news. I get the sense that it probably was a lot of early OGs sort of rotating out and going, I've made my bag. I'm older now. I need to plan for a future for my children and my estate, things like this. I need to make sure I can pay for my private jet for the next 10 years, even if the Bitcoin price changes. And now this lifestyle is too good. I'm willing to give up one further upside to lock this in. So my instincts tell me that rotation out from some of these really early holders probably dries up here. I don't know exactly when, because I don't know exactly who's doing that and how much there is. But once that happens, the fundamentals are still strong. The first principles have not changed, and it's anyone's telling sort of when that turn reversal does happen. So that's my take. My outlook on price by the end of the year, I can't give a number. I don't know, but I'm certainly holding and continuing to accumulate more. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I don't like holding people to price either, because again, like you said, if you could predict the price, you might be doing something a little bit more simple, like just moving money around, right? Instead of building awesome products that people like, but having to deal with customers. But so I think that it's very interesting because what I've just sensed from the general vibe, even on social media, it felt, even though we were hitting new all-time highs and all this, it felt more like just a generally bearish vibe throughout. You had a lot of Bitcoin infighting, which it just felt weird. And I think that it shook a lot of people out. I think your analysis of the OG side is very true. I mean, we saw this with the Galaxy, the OG who processed that 80,000 Bitcoin sell through Galaxy. From what I talked to Alex Thorne about this, he couldn't reveal personal details, of course, but he said they just wanted to diversify into some dollars and set up trust funds and inheritance planning. Like, that was why they did it. It wasn't because they didn't believe in Bitcoin anymore. They were just like, holy shit, I've got billions of dollars now. I should probably figure out how to do this planning. So more power to them. They held for well over a decade. They deserve to do whatever they want with that money. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting. I wonder, as we enter a period where I think there is going to be a significant amount of money printing, like we know this about fiat, they will print more money. They have to keep kicking the can down the road. Midterms are coming up. Trump's going to be moving in a new Federal Reserve chair. That Trump wants to pump bags, including his own. It just seems like we're entering this period where, and you see this, I think this is what the gold and silver markets are sort of telegraphing, is people are looking for exits. They're looking for lifeboats. Gold and silver have caught the bid now, but I'm just curious. I mean, after a little while, gold and silver aren't going to go up forever, right? And especially as more people gain the education about why Bitcoin is actually a superior money. But I mean, do you think that does the quote retail wave still just take a lot longer to really come back in size? Is this kind of is the institutional buying narrative where we're at right now between ETFs, treasury companies? Do you think it's the focus has shifted for a little while, but it'll make its way back? Where are you at with that?
I think it'll absolutely make its way back. I think you could view this as a number of in a number of different ways. One data point I forgot to mention, though, is we continue to see a lot of new businesses onboarding to Bitcoin. So small and medium-sized businesses continue at a healthy clip to come to onboard and buy Bitcoin. So so we are still seeing momentum there. I think that is maybe evidence that we are seeing the continuation of a trend of Bitcoin transitioning from being seen more as an investment to more as a store of value. I don't think that's a binary, right? I think that's sort of a spectrum. And I think as we transition along the spectrum, which has been predicted for a long time, things might start to feel boring, or we might have more boring phases where this thing is, over time, it preserves your value. It probably continues to grow it in real terms to a certain degree, but the 100x of the first decade isn't there anymore, right? It's a healthy, tried and true way to preserve your value through time, and so I think that if that's the case, if that's really sort of like the era we're entering, it might feel boring for a while, but actually, I think that's a very exciting development, because at River, we built towards that, right? We built towards this future where you just bank with Bitcoin. It's just this default place to save. It's this default way to store your value. Banking is boring. If Bitcoin succeeds, it's going to become boring. And that might sound kind of sad, but it's just the reality. And so, I don't think that this is crazy that this is happening. But that said, I don't think Bitcoin has fully transitioned into the boring money yet. I think we have, a number of years left with some definite sort of bull markets in front of us. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think your point about Bitcoin being boring, even it's not even boring now, but it may get boring in the future. But I think a lot of people right now still even think of it wrongly so, but think of it as boring. And I think one of the things I'd love to get your take on as well is just this incredible surge in everything becoming a prediction market, whether it be every single a crypto casino app, Robinhood, obviously you've got Kalshi, you've got Polymarket, you've got all these different things that are specifically for that. But then every other app also is hey, you can now bet on the weather and bet on whatever sports bet you want to. All of this stuff, it's Is this just a symptom of late stage fiat? Is this just a symptom of the money being broken? Because it's like, it's surged so much, and the marketing is all so deceptive and so predatory too. Like it's honestly quite disgusting.
Yeah. So, and I've called this out, a decent amount, which is sort of this gambling masquerading as finance, as investment. And, to some degree, a lot of finance is kind of gambling. But there are real things happening with finance. When you're investing in a company, you're buying a share of a real cash flow generating business like Google, and you're betting that their technology will continue to become increasingly valuable. Like that's not gambling, right? That's very clear. Trading 10x leverage on Google might be gambling. But what we're seeing is with these prediction markets, really, I think you can actually cut through everything else, and what we're actually seeing is they found a way to make sports betting look like finance. That's all it is. Because if you look at the numbers of the prediction markets, all of the volume is sports betting. It's not the weather. That's like a rounding error of the volume. Like 80% plus of the volume on the prediction markets is just on sports contracts. And so, and this is a regulatory arbitrage, because historically in two of the biggest states in the country, Texas and California, sports betting is illegal. But so you can imagine, and Texas and California is basically like, I don't know, probably if I had to guess, like 30% of the US market, right? That's a lot of money that isn't sports gambling. And what the prediction markets unlocked was this regulatory arbitrage where you just call this contract on a sports event, an event contract, and that an event contract isn't sports betting. That's a financial instrument regulated by the CFTC, and that's a federal regulation. So if you have a federal license, they're arguing they can preempt all the state gambling laws. This isn't gambling. This is finance. This is a trade. This is a financial trade, and that's federally regulated. So California and Texas state laws don't apply. So now, any person in Texas and California with a financial investment app that integrates into these prediction markets, it can make a sports bet. And you can see this in Robinhood, right? You can now just bet on the Chargers winning this Sunday in your Robinhood app, which is kind of nuts. I have a feeling that I don't know how this plays out. I've done some research into this. Some people are predicting this ends up going to the Supreme Court, being like it's like a state sort of as sort of like what is the state federal sort of jurisdictional states' rights issue. But that would probably not be until like 2027, maybe. I'm not a legal expert in any of this, to be clear. But anyways, I do agree that this is a symptom of, kind of late stage fiat. I think a lot of young people don't believe that if they work hard and focus, they will become wealthy. I think that they believe that they have to gamble to become wealthy now, which is not totally true, but it's more true than it was 30 years ago. And that's the reality.
Well, I mean, did you see even they've now opened up prediction markets on housing market prices. So you may not be able to afford a house, millennials and Zoomers, but at least you can gamble on what the price of houses will be. There was something like really just like viscerally sick about that. Like, I don't know. It's just like, I saw that headline. I was like, oh my God, this is weirdly twisted. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that with all, I think the way I view this is any non-sports prediction market is marketing. It's interesting marketing for prediction markets, but the actual business is just sports betting. So it's like interesting cover, and it also creates these headlines like, oh, you can bet on, who's going to be invaded or whatever. So yeah, it is kind of like perverse, but I think at the end of the day, those markets also just don't get any volume. Those aren't like real liquid, effective markets anyways. People don't really want to bet on that kind of thing. Because anyone with real money is just using actual liquid housing derivatives and REITs and things like this. So yeah. Now the question is, well, what to do about it? I mean, I think the root of it is fix the money. But like I agree with you, that's not happening anytime soon.
Yeah, no, it's sadly not. We're quite a ways away. At least we can fix the money on the individual level, and that's what you guys help folks do at River. I do want to get into some of the trends you're seeing a little more. I do need to cut to a very quick commercial break. We'll just be a couple of minutes, then we'll come right back. You still have a little bit of time after this as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, because I do want to get into some of those trends, specifically around small businesses onboarding, because I think this is one of kind of the lesser told stories. It's not as shiny as the Bitcoin Treasury companies, but like this is real meaningful adoption that actually moves the needle for people on a personal level. So I do want to get into that. We'll go to a very quick commercial, then we'll be right back here on RoxomTV with Alex Leishman, CEO and CTO, can walk and chew gum at the same time of River. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you, don't go!
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. I'm Walker America. I'm here with Alex Leishman, the CEO, CTO, and founder of River. Alex, I want to talk to you a little bit just about what you mentioned earlier, which is trends around small business adoption that you guys are seeing on River. Because I think this is something that we talk a lot about treasury companies, we talk a lot about where's retail, but then there's this small business adoption that is somewhere in the middle. So, I mean, what are you guys seeing from your side? Is this something that has really picked up in recent months? Has it been steady this whole time? How are you guys looking at this?
I'd say it really picked up last year. Last year, we onboarded almost 2,000 new businesses to Bitcoin, which for Bitcoin is a lot, and for our scale is also a lot. And that's a number I'm very proud of, and I hope to accelerate that even further this year. Really, what we continue to see is the pattern for onboarding a business usually follows this. The founder is usually what I call an orange-pilled dictator. The business is run by an orange-pilled dictator. It's there's not a committee that has to agree to buy Bitcoin. The business is run by one person that is already into Bitcoin themselves and goes, well, I'm buying this for myself. Might as well buy it for my business too. And there's a lot of businesses out there. The United States is a huge country with a ton of businesses with a ton of money. And it's we don't see this trend slowing down. And we're investing heavily in our ability to continue to better serve entrepreneurs and other people who run businesses. And it's not just, I can give you sort of a taste of the types of businesses we serve. It's not purely operating businesses only. There's also nonprofits, churches, lots of construction companies, real estate companies, investment holding companies, restaurants, farms, plumbers, businesses ranging from, a small mom and pop shop. One of my favorites is a hot dog stand, up to, sort of large companies you've heard of. And so it's pretty fun actually to see sort of the new businesses come in and see who's buying.
Do these businesses come in? Are they exclusively kind of buying Bitcoin, or are they also using some of the other products you guys have? Like you guys do actually offer very like 3.3% interest on any USD people keep in there. It's paid in Bitcoin. It's a super nice thing if you got some extra fiat lying around that you're waiting to do a smash buy or whatever. But are you seeing them use that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's sort of just a default thing. Like if you just deposit dollars in River, there's nothing you have to actually do. It just starts earning interest in Bitcoin. So yes, a lot of our business clients are using that. And we are, currently in the process of making these accounts even more useful for businesses. Now, that said, we are not currently, positioning ourselves as a business's primary operating account. That's still better served by just like a normal bank. But I think we'll get there. And we're building out a lot this year to better serve individuals and businesses on the fiat side of things, to make River a better place to keep and use your fiat.
What I think is so interesting about this, and I've talked to you about this before, but maybe it's worth repeating for folks here, is just the fact that, like, I asked you one time, like, how are you able to pay that interest? Could you maybe go through that quick? Because then I have a follow-up question to that. Because people wonder, how are you giving 3.3%, when my bank gives me, I don't even know what, next to nothing?
Yeah. Well, so the way this works is River actually is not a bank. And technically, we are actually not the ones paying you interest. We partner with a bank called named Lead Bank, and they are a well-run bank in Kansas City, and they serve a lot of very of the best fintechs in the country. And your cash is at Lead Bank, and it's the policy is that it's subject to change, disclaimer, but they don't lend out crypto deposits. They don't lend out any cash associated with like a Bitcoin business or anything like this. So your dollars are sitting at the Federal Reserve and are earning the Federal Reserve overnight rate. And there's a cut that gets taken out of that for things like FDIC insurance and stuff like that. So because these are FDIC insured funds. And so you're basically earning with River the money that your bank is just taking home when you deposit your cash at your normal bank. We're just passing it through to you. Because, and we're large, so we have, negotiating, we have, like leverage and getting good pricing and things like this. We really don't make much money on this product. We take a few bips to make the interest rate a rounding, a clean rounded number. But we're not really making money on this. We provide as much value as we can to the client. Our main revenue stream is just brokerage, and we try to give everything else as free as we can.
What I think is fascinating about this, and the reason I wanted to ask for that clarification again, is that this is not the norm in the TradFi banking world, right? To basically be passing on that earning from the Fed's overnight rate to the depositor. It's usually just kept, and maybe you're given a pittance from that. But why I think this is kind of so interesting right now is because you're seeing all this pushback from the big banks against some of the recent like market structure and some of the stablecoin, crypto, and Bitcoin legislation out there. And all this, the primary pushback is against stablecoins being able to offer an interest rate just for holding the stablecoin, right? Because they're saying, well, this is gonna kill our business. And you ask the question, well, what do you mean it's gonna kill your business? Like, you could offer this too, but you're not, because you're pocketing all that. And I mean, I'd love your take on this, because to me, it's kind of like the emperor has no clothes here. Like they're saying the quiet part out loud, like, hey, come on, we're pocketing this. You can't be giving this money to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that walks in here. We're busy extracting this money. Come on, be quiet. Like, let us keep doing our thing. Don't give us any competition, because this is how we make our money, is by pocketing that money that should go to the depositor.
Exactly. And there's a few interesting things to point out here. Is one is they never frame it like, oh, we're not going to make money because of stablecoins. They'll always frame it as something like it's a soundness issue. This is going to lead to structural unsoundness in the banking system. Deposits might flee, and there could be, bank runs. And obviously the counter argument to that is, well, just pay a fair interest rate, and the deposits won't go anywhere, right? Like match the stablecoin interest rates, and the deposits won't go anywhere. And so, but of course, that will just eat up into their margin. I mean, J.P. Morgan made, I think it was $90 billion in interest last year, like for themselves. That's
Wild.
And yeah, exactly. And that's $90 billion that you, the American consumer, isn't getting on your deposits. And okay, you could go, well, it's people's choice to keep their money there. Well, the reality of the situation is this. One, deposits are super sticky, right? There's a reason these banks get on all the college campuses. They know if they can be your first bank account, you're not going to go anywhere. And so, and on top of that, they know that they kind of have a monopoly in the sense that you're going to go with the ones you know about, the biggest banks, because those are going to be safe, because if something happens, the government's going to bail them out. That's not going to be the case for the little community bank. But JP Morgan is not failing, right? The US government just cannot let that happen. So they have this weird sort of government guarantee that allows them to basically just extract all of this extra wealth, because if in any time of distress, if you're a business, right, you're going, well, I'd rather make sure I for sure don't lose this cash than earn a little bit of extra interest. So I'm going to keep it at JP Morgan instead of the maybe higher interest account, right? And so it is a very unfair system.
It's just insane to me. And again, it seems so transparent to anyone who's paying attention, but I suppose a lot of people just purely maybe are not paying attention, right? They're too busy trying to live their life. But it is just, it's going to be really interesting to see how this stuff shakes out, because again, it's these stablecoin issuers, they are growing more and more powerful, right? They are becoming the new, I mean, you look at the money that Tether is making is truly impressive on it. And it's and they're also, what are they also doing? They're also buying Bitcoin with all of that money that they're making. They're buying other things too, but they're buying a lot of Bitcoin. And it's boy, when Bitcoin really starts ripping, you have to imagine there's going to be a bit of a reshuffling of kind of the power structures around here. I think we're going to continue to see that. And ultimately, it's these banks, I think they're trying to stop the tide from coming in and going out, right? They're fighting against something that ultimately is not in the interests of the everyday person. The everyday person is not going to stand for that, over a long enough time horizon. Maybe they get away with it this time, but it just seems to me like a change is coming. But again, to your point, it's even if a change comes, even if their business models become a lot less profitable, the government's just not going to let the big ones fail. Maybe that just leads to more banking sector consolidation. I don't know. We've already seen that to a huge degree, but it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, all of this is just sort of, I think, reaffirming why Bitcoin, right? It's a clear alternative to this, and but the reality is, we still need to interface with the dollar system, and that's not going away. That network effect is extremely sticky. And so, our goal at River is to give you the best of both worlds.
Yeah. No, and that's one of the things I always appreciate about you guys was also the proof of reserve side of things. That was a huge thing for me personally. And it's one of the things that I think makes it a lot more comfortable to recommend, especially after all the blowups, right? Especially after FTX, so many people have this, if they associate Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX blowing up with Bitcoin, and somehow that was, related to Bitcoin. And it's hard to separate those in a lot of people's minds who haven't gone deep. So being able to say, look, you can see how much these guys have. Look, they have your Bitcoin. It's not being, lent out to the whatever the new Alameda research is. It makes a big difference. And I think it's also one of the things where it's doing things right may be a slower growth model than just trying to grab everything you can, but it's more sustainable in the long term. And I think that's part of the ethos that I think you embody with building a Bitcoin business is you're not looking for that quick buck. You're trying to build an institution that's going to last for a long time.
Exactly. And we've already realized the value of this at River. Obviously, the early days were a bit slower because we did things like getting our own licenses and doing our own custody and all of this stuff. But, that was all worth it at the end because it avoided so many landmines. It avoided so many counterparty risks. And, I think if your mindset as an entrepreneur is, I'm going to be doing this thing for a while, you want to build your house so that you only need to build it once and you do it right, So to me, it felt like good business anyways. So far that's proven true. Proof of reserves is one of those things where it's pretty easy to do. I still don't really know why more people don't do it. I don't know if they don't want to reveal their numbers or something worse. I don't know. It's a bit surprising. I don't know if you have any theories on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to know, right? I think that it's the weird thing to me is it's like with Bitcoin, showing that proof has never been easier, right? It's extremely straightforward. Like,
yes,
the nation of El Salvador can show their proof of reserves, right? Like a company can do it, anyone can do it. Like, an individual doesn't need to do it and shouldn't do it, but like anyone who's operating a company, it seems that it's in their best interest for engendering public trust that you would want to do that. Now, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure people would give a lot of excuses for not doing it, but like, it's crazy to me. I think that this should be the standard that people should demand, where it's like, if you want to, have custody of whether it's my dollars or my Bitcoin for any length of time, like I want to know that you actually have it. That to me just seems like a no-brainer at this point. But I don't know. Again, like I'm curious where, you guys had just published a self-custody report too. And I'm just kind of wondering more broadly, there's a lot of back and forth about self-custody is not for everyone, but we should strive to get as many people as possible into self-custody. I mean, do you think that the average person ends up having Bitcoin in self-custody, or is self-custody something that is going to be reserved for the kind of, I don't want to say elite, but like the elite few who want to take that into their own hands? Because it is a burden. It is a stress. You have the potential to screw it up, and there's no customer service for self-custody, right? Like you screw it up, it's gone. But where are you at with that? I mean, how do you think that evolves as Bitcoin adoption grows?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to focus there on is like the average person. I think a lot of people have a very miscalibrated understanding of what the average person is, especially people in Bitcoin. If you sort of skew sort of to the more right end of the bell curve, your concept of average is usually really misguided. And so I think it's absolutely like kind of running a consumer business. You just see all sorts of people. There's no way the average person is going to be self-custodying their Bitcoin. There's just no question. People might get mad at me for saying that. It's just a fact. And so that said, what I do think is very important is that it is as easy as possible to self-custody your Bitcoin. And that's something that we should continue to strive for. So there is a ton of value in all the people working on self-custody technology, self-custody tools. And at River, we will always have some subset of our clients who already skew to, like, our clients are already like a self-selected, relatively small percentage of the US population that takes a lot of ownership over their life, right? They are not the average person already. And still like a very small percentage of those people are self-custodying, right? And, but it is important that some of them do. And the people who really want that to take that ownership. And I view, onboarding to Bitcoin as a process. You don't just start, an expert doing everything. You onboard and then you eventually start getting curious. Well, what if I withdraw this Bitcoin and sort of store some of it myself? And, a number of, is eventually some fraction of people end up going all the way. And that's great. I love that. We have an auto withdraw feature for people who self-custody. But I think, I don't see any world where the average person wants that responsibility.
I think that that's fair, and it may not be the most popular opinion. And that's not to say that we can't strive for as many people as possible to take self-custody. It's just also about acknowledging reality that the majority of people will not. And like, that's okay too. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin has failed. As long as people have the ability to make that credible exit and to self-custody, that is what matters. It doesn't matter how many people necessarily do it. Now, granted, there's all sorts of, okay, you can say, well, that creates different, honeypots, different risks. Okay, yes, all very true. But like at the end of the day, you're just not going to get everyone to do it. Like, you're just not. You can't even get most people to stop reusing their passwords. Like you think you're going to get everyone to self, you know what I mean? Like it's a worthy goal, but you need to be practical about it.
It's also not the right solution for a lot of people, to be honest. To be blunt.
Yep.
Especially if you have families and you care about estate planning, the complexity to properly self custody just went up like an order of magnitude, right? And there are great tools out there, Unchained, Casa, etc. But at the end of the day, like for example, like some guy just a few days ago, he had like a couple $100 million self custody, and he got phone scammed and tricked. And this is presumably somebody very sophisticated that has that much, in self custody. And the approach that we've taken at River, and we came up with we have a feature called Force Field, and this is kind of like kryptonite to these social engineers. It just says, when you set it up, you say only X amount dollars worth of Bitcoin can leave my account per week. So 1,000, 10,000, whatever. And so no more than that can leave your account, unless you disable it, and it's a 5-day cooldown period. So even if your account is completely compromised, that Bitcoin is not getting out. And that we found that to be like, you have to have like that level of, it's this hard to like move the money to have a really strong defense.
And I like that feature. I set that feature up myself. One of the other features, actually, while we're talking about that, I really like that you guys did, which I think I would like to see more folks do. But you know what? For now, I don't really care about more folks because I'm using you guys. But the supercharged buy feature is awesome. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's like it's dip buying automatically on steroids is how I would describe it.
Yeah. So this is an upgrade we made to our recurring buy feature, which is the ability to supercharge it. And basically what it does is it automatically buys more when the price dips. And how that works, I can get into the details, but basically you set up a multiplier, and that multiplier kicks in on your recurring order when the price is dipping. So if you have $10 a day, $20 a day, or $1 an hour or something like that, and the price is swinging down below a certain moving average, the multiplier kicks in, and so you might buy 50%, 100%, 200% more when that price dips. And the thinking here is, and this is also zero fee, so kind of giving more people more money, more for their money, stacking more sats as efficiently as possible, kind of like set it and forget it is the idea behind that.
This is what I love about it, because again, with dollar cost averaging, it's like you're doing exactly that. You are averaging it out, right? But a lot of people say, well, if you can just smash buy at the right times, like that's ultimately going to outperform it. But okay, like nobody can time the market. But this basically gives you in my view, it's like the best of both worlds. And for the average person, I think that this is like what I want to communicate is dollar cost averaging. It's why I always tell people, I don't tell anybody to smash buy stuff. Like if you want to, do whatever you want with your money. I don't care. But what I will always recommend is dollar cost average, because you will end up averaging down. You buy more when the price is lower in fiat cuck bucks. But with this supercharging, it's like now you buy even more when the price is lower. Like you're ultimately going to have a much better dollar cost averaging average because you are amping up those buys when the price is down. And I think like, again, for the average person, for anyone, like anyone can set up dollar cost averaging. That is easy to do. And it's one of those things where everybody chasing these prediction markets, chasing all these different things, chasing the shiny AI stocks or quantum stocks or whatever it might be, or stacking physical copper and gold and silver or whatever. It's like you can just do this really simple thing, which is dollar cost average Bitcoin. And it is going to outperform all of those other things on a long enough time scale. But I think people are just not patient, Alex. Like that's what it comes down to. Everybody wants the give it to me right now. But it's like, it really is that easy. Just dollar cost average and set it and forget it and try to create value in the world. But I don't know. Maybe people don't want the easy option.
Well, what we say is, we target people who take agency and take ownership over their financial lives. We're there for those people. That's not going to be everybody. Not everybody is going to do this. Not everybody is going to use River. I want those people to use River, and the people who want to make a quick buck and do the sports betting to try and get rich quick. Good luck. good luck. I really genuinely good luck. I want them to do well. But I think that's not going to be ROI positive for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, no, it's the sad truth. Alex, I want to be conscious of your time here, and maybe just as a wrapping up thing. I mean, are you? I guess I would just ask you at a very visceral level: are you feeling bullish going into this year? Are you feeling bullish on Bitcoin and let's say just general the vibes in general for Bitcoin? Where are you at?
Yeah, so absolutely. I'm super bullish on the River roadmap. We got a lot in store this year, and we're kind of just hitting the ground running, cranking on a lot of cool features that we've been working on for quite a long time. So I'm very fired up. I think this is going to be the most fun year yet. And like I say, no, like they say, right? The money is made, when you're focusing in the quiet periods, building, investing, getting things done. Nobody makes their money by, just jumping on an upswing when they notice it. They've put in the work now. They've made the investments now. They've built out, the infrastructure they need now, whether it's in their business or their personal life. So right now, the market's kind of flat. We're focused, we're building, and we're going to be ready to have these really useful features for our clients when the price goes back up.
I love it, man. I've got my supercharge turned on. Gonna keep it turned on. Where can people go to find you? And then if they want to get started with River as well, to get out of whatever shitcoin casino they're in.
Yeah, river.com. Easy. And I'm at Leishman on Twitter, at LEISHMAN. And yeah, feel free to, tag me on Twitter, shoot me a DM if you have any feedback or questions about the product. Happy to help make sure that you're taken care of and have the best service possible.
Awesome, man. Well, appreciate it. Appreciate your perspective as always. Thanks everybody for tuning in here on RoxomTV. I'm here.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Roxom. I am here every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also catch me on Thursdays and Fridays with Hank's show. I'm co-hosting that for the second hour of his show, so make sure to check that out as well. Check out all the other great hosts that we have here on Roxom TV. Again, thanks for joining here today. We covered a lot with our guests, Brendan Gentile and Alex Leishman, CEO and CTO of River Financial. We're going to keep bringing you the news, both Bitcoin and otherwise, every week here at Roxom. So make sure to like, subscribe, do all of that. Follow Roxom TV on X. Again, I'm Walker America. You can find me everywhere at Walker America. Thank you so much for spending your scarce time with me here today. I will see you this Thursday and Friday for Hank's show here on Roxom, and I'll see you every week here, Tuesdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for my show. It's a 3-hour marathon. Thanks for tuning in today, and I'll see you next week.